All right. What is up, fight fans, film fans, and fight film fans? My name is Thinker St. James. I am joined by my good friend Chase Parton, and it is, of course, episode 2. It is the epic conclusion, the second part, and the end of our review of McGregor Forever. Chase, how are you?
I'm very, very good. Of course, this is something that I'm really excited to do. We obviously started the first portion last week, and it was awesome. I'm glad we got to do that, and I think it worked out perfectly for obviously the fight that's coming up this Saturday for us to be able to run down the entire series really quick. So this episode obviously is the ending of this, but I'm still excited to get into it, whether it ends or not.
Absolutely. We got plenty to talk about with it. And of course, when I say episode 2, I mean of our series. Of course, we did
Correct.
episodes 1 and 2 last time. This is 3 and 4, which concludes the entire thing of this 4-part docu-series from Netflix. So that being said, of course, this is McGregor Forever. McGregor Forever is a 2023 docu-series in 4 parts from Netflix following the life and career of Conor McGregor. Chase, before we get into episode 3, anything that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I think this is, and we didn't talk about this on air before, but I think it is actually something that we may be able to touch on a little later because if anybody is watching live, there is a press conference currently going on or is about to start for the fight upcoming for Conor McGregor against Max Holloway. And, obviously the card of 329, correct? That's what it is.
Correct. Yes, indeed.
And so if anything happens to go down, if they throw tomatoes at Conor McGregor, if Conor McGregor ends up grabbing all the belts and says they are all mine and runs off, tell us. We will love to hear it in the chat. We may not get to it immediately, but at the end of the show, we can have a little moment. We will run down, obviously, the latest installation of Conor McGregor because we do get, of course, in this docuseries, a lot of press conference moments, fight moments, behind the scenes moments, and I do think that actually will go well and be a nice little ending portion of this episode. If Thinker, you would like that as well.
Absolutely, I would, and it really is a good point as to why we are doing this right now. I mean, what you had said, Chase, and I'll talk about this throughout the course of this thing, definitely in my wrap ups. But when we started this, you were saying that it's a good time to do this because this is the last in-depth look that we had gotten at Conor McGregor and his career before this very long layoff that he was on, and is now concluding with this upcoming fight. So really, in sequence, this is like the timeline being played out right before our very eyes. We're going to be going over the most recent fights that he had, and then into this downtime which we all lived through for the last 5 years, and now is going to be concluding with what is happening on this very evening. So it's kind of crazy that it all works out that way.
And I'm very excited once again to get into the episode. And then one more time, I'll give a brief shout out, obviously, to the chat here. Bleeding Edge, Sam, thank you guys for being here. And if you're, again, Sam, thank you. If you're watching us and the press conference, once again, just let us know if there's anything of note, specifically with Conor. The other portions of them may be funny, but we'll get into those another time, of course, in the Discord or in maybe a separate video or a live stream separate. But specifically, Conor McGregor, if anything goes down that we need to touch on at the end of this video, send a link and we'll obviously take a look at it. If it's posted, by the UFC channel, we can just hop in that really quick and easy. Bing, bang, boom. So shout out you guys for being here. I appreciate you, for real.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you guys. Much appreciated as well. And with that said, let's jump on in. This is episode 3. It's called Insane to This Game. And we start off with a graphic recreation of one of Conor's tweets of him deciding to retire. Of course, this is one of many, many, many Conor tweets that would end up being deleted, I'm sure. I cannot verify that this was one of the deleted tweets, but Conor deletes tweets so often, I would assume that it was one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does start with the retirement tweet, and this one is pretty funny because it's, boop, 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 and it just like types out really slow, and it's like a real long message kind of deal. At the time, this probably would have been crazy, but we see people retire all the fucking time now. Would you have believed this? Were you around to believe this? I guess is the question. Let me say that.
Yeah, absolutely not. I did not believe it. And you're right. I mean, like, this is definitely a great example of Conor being Conor. It ran like with when Conor does stuff like that, especially back at that time, it really just felt like shooting from the hip. You never knew, you never felt like anything was so permanent that it would be real. It's like one day he says that he's going to start some company that does this thing, and then that never happens or whatever. Then now it's a retirement, that never happens. It's like, Conor just be saying shit was really the feeling back then. And it'll be interesting what we're going to talk about here in a couple of seconds, where they're, saying why he might have done that. Because it's like, he doesn't really need to be generating interest that way, I would say, but we'll talk about that in a second. Either way, no, I do remember this, because this was not the only one, if I recall. I think that there were multiple times where Conor was saying that, I'm going to be stepping away from the sport.
Well, speaking of, this may have been one or more iterations of a retirement kind of post or whatever. This is a good point to bring up. They leave a lot out of these last two episodes. I don't know if you caught that. Not necessarily any that I remember off the top of my head for this episode, but if they left out retirement tweets, that adds up, because they left out a shitload of stuff later. So,
well, I mean, going back to the points that I made on the first two episodes, yes, this is going to be a recurring theme from those into these episodes as well. Just what is included, what is not included, and you having to read between the lines and extrapolate information.
and see, on the first two episodes, outside of the cage, it's a different story. We all do not, we should all not condone that, of course. But inside the cage, specifically with the later episode, we'll talk. It's like, I know what happened. I kind of witnessed it, and then it's just like, oh, let's just skate on by. I'm like, what are we talking about here?
That's exactly what I mean. Yeah,
yeah. So crazy stuff,
for
but
sure.
this is obviously, the retirement tweet is just the startup. We get to see Conor and the fam getting on their fabulous yacht, of course.
Again, it said, Conor tweets, and then now we're on a boat. It's just cold open tweet directly into family boat day.
And he's like, I'm retired, champ. I'm done fighting. Daddy's done fighting. Champ.
That was one of the interesting things to me. There is a lot of interesting stuff in this episode, I think. So, like, this was one of the interesting things to me, was I said, apparently Conor was actually believing his own bullshit at the time, right? I mean, like,
exactly.
Telling Conor Jr. that he's retiring here. So I was like, what does that say then to young child Conor, that you say that to him and then go back to fighting? And this is just obviously one example of something like that, but there's plenty of other things that are not covered that you could think of, maybe mixed messages being sent as a father to a son. I got a little feeling about that, perhaps.
And that's actually a really good point. And I really, I'm watching these episodes, and it takes me to, like, vocalize what I'm seeing to kind of digest it. You're right. So if he's telling the kids, like, I'm done, Daddy's done, he's home. It's like he was in on it. It wasn't like he was telling D, like, I gotta say this, because I'm gonna get a fight soon. But if I don't say this, and I think the coaches touch on it a little later. They were like, Conor's got to pull his strings. But it really looked as if right here he believed in it. So I don't know.
Well, and that, it really goes to, I think, a deeper psychology with Conor McGregor, where, like, it's like he has those ideas, and then in that moment he might really, really believe them, but then just the mind can pivot very quickly. Like, that's what I think, something that I'm coming to understand more over the time of watching this, is just like that. He does, like, invest himself in a lot of stuff. They talk, we're going to talk in the next episode so much about the love of the game and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, people would say, oh, his actions show you otherwise. But when you see him training, and, like, of course, like, we'll get into all the details of it. When you see him training, like, you do believe it. You know what I mean? Like, you do believe that he believes it, like, that he really is like, I am that dedicated. I am the guy that, I claim to be, and all that. And it's not an act. So, I think that he really has that, but then can just somehow navigate in his mind, like, very quickly onto the next thing.
Not just him, it's the entire team too. And they talk about it later, about the team specifically, but they believe in Conor. Conor believes in himself, and it is really kind of just a system that really worked, you know. So
Well, and yeah, and cuts both ways, of course. But yeah, let's keep going here.
so we get a young Connor clip, of course, and he's asked if there's anything that he doesn't like about his life. I think this is kind of how they worded it. And he's like, no, I remind myself daily why and what I do it for. I chose this life. I'm just insanely driven. And then we get a title card, of course, and then we get the insane to the game title, which
Yeah,
fine, whatever.
sure. Yeah, well, yeah, and he has that phrase in there, so it's a nice little
Hmm.
juxtaposition. But yeah, he's talking about fighting. He's his love of the life, and he says it's important for him to remind himself that he loves it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, bro, you literally spent multiple years living like a maniac. Like, how many reminders do you need? Like, but again, that is an older clip that's now juxtaposed with the current life. So it's kind of hard to decide how that actually manifests itself at that time versus the current era of where they're at in the story.
And this is just one of the few times that young Connor, obviously insanely driven, sure, yes, like very dedicated to the game, but obviously you talk about the things that he was doing in part to what he was doing. So it is just a weird, flip flop kind of deal. Like young Connor says one thing, new Connor is, not necessarily up on the same track.
And really, to me, like what the exact next note is, I said the retreat and return element of things is very much in line with what I was talking about in the last episodes, the cycle that Connor goes through in his life. Like that really is, if there's any one major takeaway I take away from this series is that I always kind of, I think anybody who like has observed Connor's life can kind of see that there are cycles to it, but it is so clearly presented in this show, like how he goes through cycles. Like, again, with the being contrite before a fight, and then into the rabid guy before a fight, and like going it being all in and then having to retreat. The injuries also unfortunately play into that, and that might not be in his control, but they are still part of that whole process of now I have to step away for a little while, but now I'm all back into it, and then it just kind of just goes back and forth, and then all the legal stuff, everything is cyclical with Connor.
No, absolutely. And then so we go to Dublin, Ireland in June of 2020. And this
Yes.
this is another key thing about the career of Conor McGregor. Whenever you want to say whether he came back 6 years after his return or whatever the Cerrone shit, COVID really did have an impact on everybody's career. So Conor's stardom really got, kneecapped when it got to a certain point, whether it was still growing or it was, slowly growing. COVID really shut down a lot of shit for every superstar when it came to shit like this. So and Connor specifically, who has to take a lot of time off because they have to book him correctly. There was no big shows, so Connor don't get calls, kind of deal. So and that's what they're talking about here. Connor, he's getting back into the gym. He's getting warmed up. Obviously, the UFC keeps stringing Connor along. Because they don't know what's going on with COVID. We can't necessarily get people in an arena. Fight Island is, yeesh, we got to do quarantine and stuff. So Connor feels good that, and he's not slipping away, and this is where we get our first social media roundup of the episode. And I think the Q and the haters is maybe what I
Oh
have written
yeah,
here again.
yeah. Well, when he's talking about the, in that portion where he's back in the gym, and talking about not getting booked, it's like he says right there, he's like, I could have just walked away, and been done. I'd go and live my life or whatever. And like what I like, he's not wrong. And we do, we talked already about him being a pawn in this game, to an extent because of his star power. It makes him a different entity than an average fighter, of course. And I say to that, it's like, you literally just said like, that you know what this life comes with, but you're crucially leaving out the portion of controlling yourself under these circumstances. You know what I mean? Like, and again, the documentary is not really showing us all of that side of his life as much, but like, that's really my answer to all of this. When he says these kinds of things, it's like, dude, yeah, you're right. It does suck that you don't have a fight booked. That is what comes with this level of star power. It is your responsibility. It's a unique responsibility with the level that you've achieved to keep yourself under fucking control.
Yeah.
And so when you don't do that, this is what all of the other things are what happens. So, it just is what it is at that point. It's part of the deal.
I think in this, when you go back to how this episode started with the retirement tweet, it's like Connor's all over the place at this point. He doesn't know what's going on. He goes into the gym telling his coaches, I'm locked in, I'm ready to go. But he goes home and tells his kid, I'm retired, daddy's home. So it's, when you really break it down, it's like, man, this is Connor's really, and when you start to understand the things that are going on outside of all of this, like Connor's really starting to slip away. Like you truly do see it in hindsight. People probably could have predicted it, kind of deal, but you see the elements of a great fighter starting to slip away. You know, one little detail that got him there at a time. You know, it just chips away from the bottom.
And keep that exact thought in mind as we go through these last two episodes because of what they are showing us and what they are not showing us, you know.
Yeah.
So, but yes, you are correct. We go to the digital media roundup, of course. No one buying the retirement is what I had
Yes.
there. Everyone talking about Conor. The Conor saturation just continues with this portion.
Did you get Joe Rogan? Did you hear his quote? It was pretty funny. He's like, "No,
Yeah,
I don't think he's retiring. He wants you to talk about it," and you did, and it's like, well, god damn it, like couldn't even fool Joe.
well, yeah, and that's exactly it, though, is what I was saying before. It's like, yeah, people saying, "Oh, he wants you to talk about him," bro. Everybody at this time is constantly still talking about Conor. I mean, there's really no need for that level of, of bait, PR bait or whatever. Like, you didn't need to do all of that. They also talk about Conor being the biggest driver of business, and the UFC being the business itself. Essentially, is what the conversation is. Said the organization has to properly leverage the star power. You really only have a couple of options. This goes back to him complaining about not having the fights. You only have a couple of options when it comes to a star of his caliber. You can, one, actually have him fighting the best. You could, two, have him fight not exactly the best, but people who will make him look good. Or
Mhm.
three, you have him fighting random whoever the fucks who just want the paycheck. Which does he prefer out of those? You know what I mean? Like what? Like because I guarantee you, if you ask this version of Conor here, which of those three options is best for you? Of course, he wants to fight the best. So you don't just get that. You know what I mean? Like that has to be manufactured. That has to be constructed. So them saying, "Oh, you need to be," thinking in his mind that like he needs to be doing this whole like false retirement thing in order to like move the needle along. I don't, it doesn't ring true to me, even if he did have that as his intention. And B, I don't think it was ever going to yield that the outcome either way. Like you were always going to have these circumstances regardless.
No, absolutely, and so yeah, so Connor just keeps complaining about inactivity, and you know, there's been no fights after Cerrone, and they've been just putting off McGregor's next fight, of course, and then we just go to July of 2020, and then we get to see some more wholesome moments between D and Connor, of course, and they get into a car. Then they get on a private jet. Obviously, you know, I have to get on the car to drive the runway to get to the boat, and then the boat goes to the helipad. You know, obviously, we got all these different layers to it. And then this is a pretty funny moment. They're having dinner, and Dee recalls a story of young Connor where he's, you know, Mystic Mac was really on his shit because she's like, you know, I remember you told me one of these days, you know, we're going to get on a private jet and we're going to fly to such and such and we're going to have dinner on that private jet. And he's like, you know, it's Mystic Mac, whatever you know.
Well, so okay, this is actually one of the elements here that I had a couple of notes about because yeah, this is an interesting little portion, especially through the lens of a documentary series. So first
Mm,
of all, we're going to the plane. They're going to Monaco is what they're on the
mm.
way to, right? So Connor is in the car, the shuttle to the private jet. He's wearing a shirt that says "I am grateful" on it, which I'm like, okay, I mean, sure, I'm sure there's we'll talk about gratitude as a big theme in this episode. So like, it was just kind of funny that they like, I don't know if they put him in that shirt or if that was like, what he just happened to be wearing, but a little on the nose, I guess you could say, right? He's laughing with D. And I said this is about a sanitized portrayal of McGregor as it gets, but D with exactly what you were talking about. She's doing the "isn't it crazy that we're rich now" spiel while they're on the private jet, and I'm like, yeah, it's like Connor. His response was that like because she says, oh, if could you have thought in 5 years that like we would be on this jet, having dinner on a private jet, and Connor's like, I would have told that sounds like something I would have said, and so it's like it's funny to have the dichotomy of I'm grateful Connor, because again, gratitude will be a theme of this episode in certain places, juxtaposed with I'm grateful, but I also saw all this shit coming because because I'm the man. That's how it
Yeah.
goes.
And then obviously they clanked. They get a cheers, of course, and then we get Ariel is talking with. She talks about D. Ariel, excuse me. Ariel is talking about D with young Connor. We get a little spliced in moment here, and this is where and Thinker has actually talked about this. Earlier in the show. D has been by his side. This is something that going into the documentary. you would have known if you are a Conor McGregor fan, if you are somebody who's kept up with the sport. So that is a very good note, because it took till episode 3 for us to really get a good farewell kind of not send off, but a moment for D here. And she stuck by him when he had nothing. She gives Conor pride. When he provides for her, he feels like extremely prideful in himself. I think this might have been the clip where he's talking about, when my girl has 7 cars, for every day of the week or whatever, I'm gonna be a happy man, something like that. And it was
Yeah.
it was a good moment, it was nice.
Yeah, right. And I'm glad that they gave her that shine there. And what I say to all of this, including the schmaltz on the plane, is that I do believe that the love between them is genuine. I've always said
Mhm.
that. I think that at the end of the day, Dee is about as good a girl as you could possibly ever imagine, especially knowing all of what you know about Conor McGregor. And really, a lot of people would say, and I mean, even at times, I probably myself have been somewhat guilty of saying, oh, maybe she's just in it because of the external factors, the money and all that. I don't even believe that when I say it. I really do think that she has always been in love with this guy, and that she goes and stays through what maybe other people might not, because that is a very genuine connection that the two of them have. How much of it is played up for the cameras as far as like the presentation of it, up to your interpretation. But I do believe at the end of the day, underneath it all, that it's very real between the two of them, and it comes from a deeper place that has very little to do with all of the wealth and extravagance.
No, absolutely. And listen, Connor being the spiritual person that he is, they were put here for each other. That is just kind of how it is. So
Sure.
that's just how the story goes. But the next portion, we go to Portugal. And this is awesome because in September of 2020, we get the appearance of bald Connor. This dude is rocking the buzz cut. He has no more
True.
hair, and he's rocking leopard print. Just
Oh,
random.
good Lord. Yes, that leopard print shirt. I have the note about that. Before we get to that, there was one more thing that was on the theme
Mm,
of gratitude I did want to mention, because he does have a clip right here where he says, he says, be grateful and more. Like, he's talking about himself and how grateful he is. It says, be grateful and more comes to you. I come from a place of gratitude, and it attracts positivity, is basically. And I said, again, great gratitude being a theme of this episode so far. I do believe that Connor at this point does exemplify levels of gratitude. He should probably be more grateful that there have never been any consequences for his poorer behaviors back then, but I don't know if he ever really was. And maybe now there actually have been some repercussions, so maybe he feels that a little bit more. And of course, with this new saved element of him, and giving himself to religion a little bit more, maybe that kind of plays a part in that. But I think that that's the crucial piece, that's missing from the documentary for sure, but also missing from Connor is the gratitude for the fact that yes, you made it happen, and that is completely no one can take that away from you. That's completely valid. But at the end of the day, like, you now are afforded a level of untouchability that very few people on the planet have. Where's the gratitude and the positivity to make that not itself anymore? Like, I would think that gratitude would lend itself to that being diminished.
mhm. Well, we see Connor give back in a few instances. Now, this doesn't necessarily erase what he has done or exemplify him from anything, but there are moments where he does give back, whether it's for the cameras that he hired to see him do it or not. That's
Fair.
another topic for another day. But
Yeah, fair enough.
so next we get the leopard print bald Connor is
Yeah,
exactly how I wrote here. To
we're on a commercial shoot out here, and we get to see
yes,
quality Connor line reading. I said this type of performance never his strong suit, but we did get a couple of him having to, look into the camera and say snappy things.
And then I don't know who asked the question. It wasn't like an interviewer. It kind of just seemed like Connor was chopping it up with a dude on the side of the shoot or something. Because like the dude was
Bro,
just standing there and he was like, "So do you feel what do you feel about Habib? What do you think about that loss or whatever?" And
this
go
was
on.
this was the funniest part of this episode to me, is that Connor in the leopard print shirt is just talking. He's going through his career in great detail to some random
Ju-
dude on this commercial shoot.
I was so confused who this dude was because he looks like kind of like he's dressed like a busboy, and it's
He's
like
like a PA. He's just like
yeah,
he's just some guy working on the commercial, but he asked him the question, and Connor can't stop.
well, and fair play to Connor because like if it is just some random dude who really just likes UFC, Connor's doing a commercial. No, they don't give a fuck about UFC. They're there to just do their ad read or whatever. The dude that was there, he probably did just like want to ask like, hey, can I ask you a question? Like, what do you think? How'd that Habib stuff? And Connor really does break down a lot here, which is interesting. Because Connor talks specifically about the bus situation, which I find really funny. He's like, all right, we're gonna talk about my court cases really quick. So.
Well, that's the thing is that he touches on a number, like it's almost one of those things that like like you ask a simple question and then somebody just starts really
Trauma
expounding.
dumping on you.
Yeah, it really kind of feels like that a little bit because I said he's really going into detail with this rando right here. Is that he talks about the recognition of his lifestyle contributing to the Habib loss. I thought that was an interesting note in this very brief conversation. But you are right because I do acknowledge that what you're saying with this. It's like this is just potentially like a guy who's working on
The
the shoot,
only
but
dude that would talk you like fights with him on that day, maybe.
yeah, I mean, whether it's that or just the fact that it is somebody who is showing a genuine interest in him, aside from the status level that he has to be the person, the star of this shoot or whatever. Like he's asking him more of a genuine question than he's probably getting from the average person. Or it legitimately could just be that he is as a fan, and Connor is reacting this way to a fan. Like, and that in and of itself is kind of a nice thing that someone of that status would give this level of insight to just the average person asking the question. I acknowledge all these things, but it is very funny to see it in this context as he's in the leopard shirt in between shoots or whatever, in between takes, and he's giving this just very large amount of detail. Maybe it almost feels like a little bit of a therapy session just in that
Yeah.
very small moment.
Well, and he does say some really good stuff. If you talk about a good therapy session, I mean, Connor accepts some things. Obviously, he knows that he was at fault. I already won when he didn't get off the bus. He didn't want to come out, and I was there. I showed up to him. I took it too far, and that was on me. I made myself, I made my team, I made everybody involved. I failed them, as I think is how he worded it. I failed them, and I failed martial arts by taking it further than that because he had already won. There was nothing else to do. Habib was taking a shot in the bus, So that's just really how it goes. And I said another thing that Connor was talking about is he was living multiple lives. He wanted to take martial arts so seriously, but then he would take it further than the martial arts like lifestyle. So
And that's exactly it, where he's talking about the lifestyle contributing to the loss. And I was like, I thought that was an interesting admission from him because,
mhm.
it's very rare. It feels, at least, especially in this docuseries, it's very rare that we get that level of admission about the other aspects of his life and how they negatively contribute to the entirety of it. We see so much in this documentary of training footage, of dedication, this level of intensity, the 3 hours in the gym a day kind of shit, two sessions a day, Connor at this point. But like that, we know that there is more. So it's like, how is it actually contributing when all you're seeing is the one side? I thought it was interesting to hear from him directly that there is an acknowledgement that it does contribute negatively.
And then I do like how he kind of ends it. He's like, he can run, but he cannot hide. And it's like, oh, brother, if he really knew, So we'll obviously get into it. And then I obviously made a quotation here. Habib has hid very well behind crypto schemes, by the way. So
True. Wow, big fact. Shout out to Popka NFT. But yeah, he can run, but he can't hide. Always love hearing that from someone saying it about another guy who he's just lost the fight to.
Yeah. And who is clearly going to run and hide for the remainder of the interaction between them. There's no
Yeah.
reason for a rematch. Of course, he's literally just not going to pay you any mind after. So
True, yeah, and we of course know to be true to this day because literally just I believe either today or yesterday, Connor's still talking about Habib. He just made another comment about him. Oh, what has he actually done for this sport? He had X amount of fights. He never really. It's like obviously he is still living rent free in your head, and that is this is the genesis of all of that. So yeah, I did say a fight would have been a nice focal point because they're talking about him not having a fight to train for at this point. Now we're back into training footage. I said a fight would have been a nice focal point But he's always training, always ready, says his coach. And, then of course, 5 years off will say otherwise, leg break and juice cycle aside. So, I mean, like we are moving into this next portion here with, them talking about the ever ready Conor. But much like the Habib situation, where you've got a focus that becomes unrealized, you have Conor doing all of this training and us being told he's always ready, he's always going to be, right there to come back. And then what we know at this point in history is maybe that not being as true as they're trying to make us believe.
Yeah, this next part with Connor training, I mean, it's pretty standard. You get him running up a dirt hill like a couple different times, bald Connor, with just in underwear with like a strap around him. Obviously, I think it's like a heartbeat kind of monitor thingy. Anyway, there's a portion before this that he talks about that I think is a really good talking point for MMA in general. Any martial arts, combat sports, attention span. You gotta be able to be engaged with what you're doing for one longer periods than the actual bouts themselves, because you have to train to get to the bouts, but then when the bouts come you have to be locked in, and I think attention span specifically, obviously people talk about focus, be focused, but attention span, the way that he said it, I'm like, you just don't hear people really break it down into layman's terms, like like I don't know. So it was interesting. I thought that point was good.
Connor, yet again, saying the right thing at the right time. It never fails that Connor has some deep insights. Again, it's like you watch Connor at length in a documentary like this, and you really do understand that he is not a dummy. Like, this is
Yeah,
an intelligent guy. But it's just
at
like it's.
times.
Oh yeah, I mean, right. Well, I said that in the first episode too. You see so much of this man's life, you can pick out many things where
Yeah.
he's not. But like in instances like that, especially talking about fighting, and like you see as much dedication as they show in this series, his commitment to fighting, the insights that he has about fighting are very valid. It's just the fact that they are paired. It's the two wolves, man. Connor is constantly feeding the wrong wolf when the right wolf is right there waiting to be fed.
No, absolutely. And this is so when, we get more Connor, we get more Ariel talking about Connor, understanding his star power. He understands how to utilize it. Obviously he's not no dummy, just like you were talking about. He knows how to make Azalea Banks or whatever send a tweet that's crazy. Who knows if this was planned or not? But those are just the little things. So the star power. This is when Connor starts to take matters into his own hands. He tweets out, or he gets into contact with Dustin Poirier, his boy. By the way, I'm glad you got to witness finally. We'll talk about it, of course.
Sure.
He takes matters into his own hands. He gets Dustin on the phone. They are ready to make a boxing match or some sort for charity, and the UFC steps in and says, "No, if you're going to fight, we're going to make money off of it." So this is how we actually get the rematch, which I find kind of funny. Like, was it really that easy? Like, all right, Dustin, we're going to fucking fight, bro. We're going to do it for charity, and they're like, "Oh, no, 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 no. We'll give you next week. Just give us a couple weeks. We got you."
Yeah, see, this is an interesting element right here, right? So yes, you're right. Connor takes the law into his own hands here, matchmaking the charity boxing match with Dustin on Twitter. I said, of course, there was no way that this was ever going to fly with the UFC. I think everybody involved definitely knew that. Everybody's saying that Connor forced the UFC's hand. I think it's is complete bullshit in this regard. I think that.
Mm.
Oh, absolutely. I think really my perspective on this, and I think that I'm on the right track here, is much like the Habib fight, the UFC follows the trail that Connor lays out, and they just like where it leads to at this period of time, of course. So it's like, yeah, he throws the dolly. Obviously, they have to be like, oh man, I can't believe that Connor would do something like that. And then where do we see that same footage? In the promo package for the UFC event when they are fighting each other. We talked about that in that episode, in the Beeb episode, me saying that's like, at the time it was nice that the organization had the ability and the put the effort in to make the fight that made the most sense at the time. So really though, it's all Connor kind of just being a bull in a china shop, just knocking into walls and stuff, and then the UFC saying, huh, yeah, that actually kind of looks good. Maybe we'll just do that, And I think that this is exactly what happened here. Connor, them sort of, trying to figure out the next step. Connor saying, oh, I got to be active. I got to do whatever I'm going to do. He starts this cycle, and then they're like, yeah, Dustin fight. That actually does sound pretty good.
And I actually think this goes back to the beginning as well, when you're talking about, when we're talking about him and the family, specifically telling him he's done fighting. I think that further proves that he was in on it, because if he was going to force the UFC's hand, if this is how it worked, I mean, this worked. Retirement tweet didn't fucking work. They didn't give a shit. Here we are asking for a charity match with Dustin. That worked. Now we get a fight on the hand. So whether or not he forced their hand or they followed the trail of it, who cares? It finally got made, and we have a rematch that is official, and then we get our social media roundup one more time.
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I think that at the end of the day, from the UFC perspective, like they would sit back and be like, let them believe that they forced our hand. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, everybody
Got
online,
us. Damn.
exactly, yeah. Man, he really did it. Look at the amazing star power of Conor, that he was able to move mountains with the organization. And it's like, yeah, sure, let them believe whatever the fuck they want to believe, and we will rake the money in. So
Yeah.
yeah, all works out that way. Yes, we do have another social media roundup yet again. All more of the same basic conversation here, and then was there any points in there that you wanted to touch on?
No, the social media roundups, they're really not saying too much for me. They're all just blabbering the same kind of dealio. This isn't we get a lot of, it sounds like this might have even been a point earlier. We get a lot of Irish creators, of course, when it comes to the social media roundup. And at this point in the docuseries, they are not very happy with this guy. I think that's how this is going. Like they're all like, this guy, he's coming back. He's not going to be the same. It's been too long. And it's like, brother, wait a couple years and we're going to find out.
Yeah, well, and that is an interesting element too of where it has gotten to with Ireland, because I have heard multiple times and in different ways that the country of Ireland really not supporting Conor at all, in a lot of for a lot of different reasons now, of course. But interesting to see it starting from almost a more pure place when it comes to just the fighting itself, and them not thinking that he's the same guy or whatever. Maybe seeing a little bit of the antics going on outside of the fighting that have led them to that thought process. But then, of course, over time, it's going to gestate into something much bigger.
No, absolutely. So social media roundup happens, and then we get to Connor's film area. This is like his theater, his home theater kind of deal.
Correct.
He's watching Habib and Justin, and Connor is watching very, very closely.
He is hate watching this thing.
You should have kept the clinch. Gosh, like what do you do? It's pretty funny. And then Connor's witnessing the finish, and he's like, God damn, let it go. God dang. He's having a little moment. Connor is just visibly not having a good one. And he says goodnight to Junior. And then Habib gets on his post-fight speech and announces his retirement, and you kind of feel the vibes just sink out of there, like, you motherfucker. That was after Dustin. That was supposed to be, we were going to get that rematch, but Habib didn't want to, he didn't want to carry on the legacy, of course, and Connor gets frustrated. And I love this portion of whoever was editing this and added the ears ringing effect. I'm like, man, that's perfect for this. Connor, he's not listening to anything anymore. Like, he's just so fucking pissed. This is PTSD for him happening right now. Like,
for sure.
Fuck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It went really this from a filmmaking standpoint is one of the better portions of the episode and of the series, I would say, because you get two emotions juxtaposed with each other very, very quickly. You get the anger that he felt when Habib won, which was very real, because Conor is, I will hold this grudge against you till the day that I die. That is Conor McGregor right there. If I don't have the win, I'm going to hold the grudge until I do have the win. So that's emotion number one. And then emotion number two is Conor internalizing Habib's retirement. I mean, that is, just him sort of like it almost washes over him in a way. It's like he's watching it. The rematch is dissolving before his eyes. It certainly drove the point home with the amount of lingering that the camera does on him. It's where you stay on his face just to see everything sort of just process in his brain. It was a pretty powerful moment based on everything that
I actually and because obviously you see the life get sucked out of the room, and Connor is visibly frustrated. But this next portion is actually really good. Were you surprised by it at all? Is what like one of his homies asked, or the cameraman, whatever you're gonna say, and he's like, no, but it is what it is. He said he talked with his mom for 3 days before the fight or whatever. Habib did, of course, and he made the decision based on that, and he's okay with that. And I actually really like that portion, because as much hatred as there is, again, Conor has talked about martial arts and respect, in the young Conor clips, and in this portion, he talked with his mom for 3 days, made the decision. He's cool with it, but the main key is he sits down and eats alone after this. But what do you have to say?
Oh, no, fair. I didn't even notice that detail. That's a good detail. I like that. But no, no, I would have been okay. I would have been 100% with you at that point had he not in the same breath said, I don't actually believe it though. You know, like
Well, fair.
he right then was like, I don't believe he's actually retiring. And my note to that was he wasn't faking like you, brother.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
So but I do enjoy the ending portion of him just sitting down alone because everybody's asleep. He's got to get the rest of his carbs or whatever. He's going to go train. Plenty of times they actually say later as Connor trains late at night, like
Yeah.
that's his thing. Even going when he goes overseas, in the UAE or whatever, like training overnight was like a big prevalent thing. So I find it interesting after all this. You see the mood shifts. The vibes go low, and then acceptance. You see all the whatever emotions go through, and then he sits down and he just eats alone. And I'm like, man, we've seen him eat with his family before. We've seen him with both of his belts where he chose to eat with his belts over, and now here we are, and it's nothing. He has nothing else. Habib's gone out the picture. He's not really in the UFC. He had to force them, whatever you want to say, to get the Dustin fight. So that moment right there where there's just nothing with him and it's just him eating alone, I really like that after this. It was cool.
Yeah, yeah, I like it too. So yeah, I mean, now we're that's kind of where that ends. We are now 1 month out from the Poirier fight. Of course, the rematch. Part three or no, this is still the actual rematch here. This is part
Yes.
two. So yeah, so we're out from the rematch. So we got to see Conor's knockout footage from the first fight.
Mhm.
Dustin has his own highlights here. Those were also very nice.
Yeah, Dustin the Diamond. This is the first instance of where you get to see. I mean, obviously everybody got a little title card, a little finish sequence, but once you get introduced to Dustin Poirier, he takes over for the rest of the fucking show here. So I'm telling you, and we can break it down if you want further, but Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, they are friends. I'm telling you, and it even goes further to this day. Conor has not said anything ill about Dustin and the shit that's happened in the airport. He's actually been very vocal on his side about it. So the shtick aside, the arguments aside, listen, I've argued with people, I've yelled at people, and we've been able to be cool. I just this is just professionalism, competition. These guys are boys, and so this is the first instance where you get to see Dustin make his entrance into the docu-series, and this is a really good portion. I think Dustin actually is a really good portion of this, so we get to see Dustin. He was a featherweight, and then he was, not really looking well. But when he hit lightweight, that's when it all changed, And Dustin was here to avenge this loss that he had. At featherweight, it's one thing, but now I'm in the division that I run stuff. You come to me, we're gonna take the rematch, and we're gonna see what happens. And I actually listen. Shout out to Dustin Poirier. I mean, for what it is, always been game. So there you go.
Absolutely, and one of the best on the planet for a long time, and definitely at this time. So,
Yeah.
yeah, everything looking good when it comes to Dustin, but I guess not much happened a month out because now we're 2 weeks out.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely a big jump. We go 1 month, we skip backwards 6 years, and then we skip forward 6 years and 8 months, and it's like, what the fuck? Whoa, we just missed a lot here. So
Yeah,
okay,
really weird that they chose to include a graphic for the time period for that when really all we saw was highlights and past footage. But regardless, we're in Dubai now, so we're going over the COVID protocol for the fights, which of course, as you mentioned, this really did. It cannot be overstated how on everything's ear this was at the time. I mean, with the amount of people traveling around, the changes obviously seem a lot more trivial compared to the average people, right? I mean, like, the average person is sitting at home, fucking growing a 10-foot beard and like pissing, into jars and shit. I mean, like, everybody's like, we're living like animals back home. These people are still living, moderately regular lives, but there are a lot of roadblocks to go through, and you're seeing all of those when it comes to the fight portion of things here.
Yeah, Connor is getting his equipment set up, in his room before we get to the actual like fighter hotel portion. I always think it's fun that they just have like a quick like little elliptical that they can screw together for him really quick. He can always just have his little shit. Awesome. And then he's here 2 weeks early. Obviously the fight isn't for 2 weeks, but he's here to get acclimated. Get the vibes, of course. And then yes, we get a brief breakdown of like the COVID schedule, and then we're in the bubble, and everybody's talking about how this is a common goal for everybody is to make Conor's fight happen. If one thing goes wrong, we're all screwed, and like the fight just doesn't happen. So we've all worked really, really hard to make this happen. We all got to abide by the rules. Everyone's got to be on the same page. Discipline and dedication for the whole team is key. We need to be a well-oiled, high fight IQ machine is how they ended that, and I really kind of liked it. So it's
Yeah,
good.
I mean, it's kind of talking about Connor specifically with that quote, but it does
Mm,
apply to the entire team. And really, it reminds me a lot of when I worked in live. Like, you might have one singer, like let's say you were doing like Madonna's concert or whatever. Obviously, she is the singular focus of the show, but it takes a crew of many, many, many people to make a production of that size happen. Connor, no different, really. I mean, he is the star, he's the main attraction, but it takes a team. And Connor's going to talk about his connection to his team a little bit later in the show, and we'll talk about that then. But he keeps the team around him that he chose the team, keeps that team, and their dedication has to match his dedication at least when it comes to the fighting. So I do appreciate that from the team that he has.
No, absolutely. And so we have the COVID protocols have actually begun, a couple days out, testing daily, positive tests considered contagious. So you got to stay vigilant. And then we get a video of the mouth swab on Conor McGregor, and who knows what that came back with.
They were only testing for certain things, I would think, but yeah, if they had broadened that, who knows?
Yeah, they definitely were probably thinking like, yeah, let's just keep it to ourselves. But either way, we go 1 week out from Connor Dustin rematch. We hit the beach. Connor, and this is a quote from him. We'll hit the beach, and then we'll hit the big yacht, and then we'll head into Abu Dhabi. I'm like, no, you just head to the big yacht. Just
I mean,
not just the small yacht, not even just the yacht. No, we're gonna go get on the big yacht, and then later when you do see the yacht, you're like, I guess that is the big yacht.
Yeah,
So
yeah, big yacht is an understatement, but yes, you're right. I mean, we've got back on the boat. We got boats and jets and cars, all manners of vehicles in this episode. And yeah, I say the funny thing to me was Connor saying that because they are going to go to the mega yacht now, and when we say mega yacht, this thing it's essentially like a cruise ship for one
mm,
person, for the one family on this boat that it's the size of a town. And he says the thing that was funny to me. Connor says that being on the mega yacht recenters him, and I said, man, money really does change people, bro.
well, you must not have seen of what grounded him. When they got on this mega yacht, there was a slush puppy machine.
I certainly
So
did see that. Yes, look at that. Isn't that genius?
it's like
Have
their
a
own
slush puppy.
7-Eleven. They have their own corner store. Why would they not feel at home? I mean, this is right on the boots on the ground here. You have a slush puppy machine with 3 flavors. You got the lime, cherry, and oh, dude, I cannot believe them.
The
Crazy.
kids seem to enjoy that. So congratulations, you get a slushy on a mega yacht. And again, it is wild seeing a boat of this. This is like a boat that would be rented out for like a company party, with the company being like the size of like 300 people or something like
Mhm.
that. Like, this is a massive, massive vessel to just have four people essentially on it, the family and maybe a couple of the the team perhaps, and then an entire crew that is manning this monster vessel. It's an interesting juxtaposition always.
And think about this. BKFC will do a whole event on something similar to that
That is
eventually.
exactly true. Absolutely. Yeah, all those staterooms being filled up with actual fans as opposed to one family.
Yeah, absolutely. But so Connor, he talks about, he's feeling very motivated seeing all this. This is great to him, and I actually wrote it before we get to a quote here in a second, but the way I wrote it actually ties right into what he says. Connor feels very motivated seeing his family enjoy the fruits, obviously the fruits of his labor. And then we get a young Connor clip talking about his new Louis bag, and they're like, well, you got a new Louis Vuitton bag. What's that about? What's going in there? And he's like, I feel grateful that I made all this money. I did this. I worked really hard, so I'm going to enjoy the fruits of my labor. This bag is an example of how hard I work. I work harder than everybody. I'm up when they're not up. This I'm going to enjoy the benefits of this life is kind of how he explained it. Which, to be fair, at a certain point, rich people doing stupid stuff with their lives and it's kind of just NPC stuff that they don't really even think about. It's one thing, but Connor acknowledging that he's living his life to the fullest with his money, I guess I got to respect it. I ain't got it, but if he's got it and he wants to do what he wants with it, that's his prerogative, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he says, no one works harder than me inside or outside of the octagon. And what I said to that was that it is probably true at the time. I mean, Connor did have to work very hard to get all of what he has. I mean, this is not something that was just handed to him.
Hmm.
Like, regardless of how much of Connor comes from natural charisma versus how much was his fighting ability or a combination of those things, he did the work to make all of that happen. So I think that it is very important to always keep in perspective that where Connor would eventually get to did have to be built. It didn't happen in a vacuum and it didn't happen instantly. I mean, he had to make that happen. So I do think at the time it probably had some truth to it, especially at the time of the clip that you're talking about, with the Louis bag. But already by the Poirier fight, I would say that has probably faded somewhat significantly. And again, this is another example of how interesting it is with this documentary to try to see what they're portraying versus the reality of the time. And having to read between those lines is constantly a task and an endeavor that you're having to go through as the viewer.
Absolutely. And so now we go to the Fight Island. It is 4 days until Connor and Dustin's rematch. You know, Connor sits down for an interview and he is in adult mode. He's he's all suits and ties. You know, I think he actually even has his glasses on at this point, which is pretty goofy, but obviously it's goofy to be blind. No, but the glasses that he specifically wears are pretty goofy looking. But it's okay. So we get flashbacks to 2014 Connor and Dustin before the beef, or no, I'm sorry, the beef pre-fight. You know, Connor watching clips of Dustin, and which is funny. You know, Dustin's shouting at him across they're jawing at each other, of course. And this is actually another point where I realized that they're bros. Connor is in his like in his loft or whatever on his bed, watching clips of Dustin talk shit about him, and it's like, dude, that's some shit I'd probably do. Like it's probably fun. It's probably really funny, bro. I mean, come on, like.
Oh yeah, apparently the lead up to McGregor Poirier 1 was pretty contentious. That would have been right around the time when I was becoming more of an active, like regular follower of the sport as opposed to just a casual observer. So I don't remember the lead up to that being as contentious as it was, but you see those clips and it did seem like they were really kind of they were going after each other a little bit. But of course, as you say, don't worry, Connor is mature now. He's in his suit,
Yes.
he's got his spectacles on. And then he's doing this interview with the UFC Saudi Arabia, and this interviewer has one of the funniest bars that I've ever heard an interviewer say. And I don't know if this maybe came from a little language element. She spoke perfect English, so I don't know. I would say it's probably not this, but her bar was classic. She says, "The first fight was so long ago. Back then, you were both featherweights. Now you're both fathers."
Yes, yes, this was good. I love this one. Yes. Oh my gosh. What a bar. I don't even know if there's anything to say after that. Like, what do you even say? Because, like, yeah, that fair adds up, does add up here. But either way, yes, he's matured, he's grown now. Two kids we were, but yes, now we are fathers. It's going to be a proper a run at 155. Line them up. And he sits down with Megan O'Leary, I think, is also what happens after this portion. And and he says, I'm looking for a cleaner shot and a better time. And this is actually where I have it wrote down. We're featherweights now fathers. Yes, that was the funny portion there. Yeah, so
Yeah. Well,
grown man Connor definitely in his element here.
and what I say when it comes to Connor in these circumstances, especially what like that wasn't even the crazy. We'll talk about another interview coming up where he's getting a little bit more like poked at.
Hmm.
Connor has a very good way of navigating interviews. He's always very he navigates interviews very well. He goes with the flow of interviews very well. So it's really hard for you to throw Connor off of his game. What I would really like to see at some point would be Connor in a situation with like a Sacha Baron Cohen style person or someone who's actually like trying to go, like get him into like ask him weirder questions like for comedy's sake, just to see if
Matan
like,
exists.
there you go, bro. Fucking Conor McGregor on Matan would be possibly one of the greatest things of all time. But that's exactly, yes. I think it would be interesting to see him go through that because he's always very like he's nimble in these kinds of situations. He like if you try to zig, he'll zig with you. I mean, he's able to follow along and has a good answer for everything.
And actually, if you've watched any of the recent interview clips, Connor still has that the what is it called, the gift of gab. He
Sure.
can spin anything. He's said some pretty funny things in these recent interviews that have been running around. But that's obviously other portions for another time. Connor. I think this is where his team's talking about it's very rewarding to see Conor himself, in this point in his life, he's getting to enjoy where he's made it. It's very cool to see from their point of view, of course. And this is where we get the iconic Conor signing the posters like he doesn't give a shit. And he even still does this. They have the new ones. He was just signing the posters like yesterday, and he was doing the same signature. But it's even funnier is because he don't give a shit so much that he just had Connor Jr. on. They'll just scribble on their shit. And Connor Jr. just wrote over somebody's signature every single time. It was awesome.
That was great. I noticed that too. Yeah, Connor signing posters, having little Connor sign them. I said, and I really, I don't like to talk about people's kids, but obviously the kids are a part of this, whatever. But
Yeah.
like with like Connor's life and everything that I had in the notes here, as good a place as any to say it. Going to be very interesting to see how these kids turn out. Just in the big picture down the line. I'm not saying that it's going to be bad or anything. I don't know. I'm just saying that, like, knowing what we know, it's going to be an interesting progression for these children. And then the other question I had was also wonder who got the Connor Jr. signed posters. Did those
Yeah.
actually go out to people? Might be even more of a
They
collector's item.
It probably is. They were, hey, listen, worth $1 million. I don't know, but either way, now it is 3 days until Dustin and Connor. We're taking promo photos, and we're looking through the catalog of all the photos that he just took. And Connor's, he's the best shape he's ever been in. I put a quote here on that line because I didn't want to actually be the one to say that he was in the best shape of his life. I'm not the one to be able to make that comparison, but he says this is the best shape of his life, and we get more old quotes from Connor, and this is actually a really good one. This is one of my favorite quotes from Connor. Is the Van Gogh moment where he's like, I'm going to play an old. It's actually an interviewer plays an old clip of Connor at the press conference so Connor can hear it or whatever, or at the media day, whatever, and. It's Connor talking about how he lost his mind in the process, just like Van Gogh. I had to be so dedicated that I went insane to this, but I'm happy that I did because now when I look back and everybody that I have is provided for. I think this is actually the 7 cars a day line that he drops from his wife. It he would be happy looking back if he was able to accomplish that, and at the expense of him losing his mind to the game, of course. And it was very good. I liked it.
Yeah, I also like this quote a lot. I like this exchange a lot here. Yeah, this is something I respect greatly. I talk a lot about. We talked about this on the Warrior review. Moby Dick, my favorite book. This is what Moby Dick is about right here. This exact thing that he's talking about right here. Losing your mind in the quest for something greater than yourself. Um, Connor is what happens when you actually conquer the whale, which is an
Hmm.
interesting element there too. Obviously, Ahab and Moby Dick does not have that ability and does not get that luxury in the end, but Connor does, and this is an interesting difference there because while Ahab in the book loses his mind in pursuit of a failure, essentially something that he could never conquer, Connor loses his mind in a success, even with these failures that we are seeing throughout this series. So it's very interesting dichotomy between those two avenues. But when you are that dedicated to something, those are the outcomes, right? You can either lose your mind in success or you can lose it in failure. But either way, you do detach a portion of your old personage to the greater pursuit. And I think that there is something to be greatly respected about that.
No, absolutely. And this is where, again, I keep bringing it up, but this is just another instance of where I think Connor and Dustin, they pull the curtain back. So we get to the press conference, and this is, Dustin, Connor gets, obviously he gets that question or whatever, and, it speaks to Connor. This is something that really speaks to him. He has a little emotional moment. He gets kind of choked up or whatever. Here in this, Dustin gets asked a question, like, hey, what's your favorite color? And he's like, it's fucking blue. Some shit like that. Dustin answers really humbly, respectfully, nothing too crazy. And then Connor interjects and he's like, I hear you doing some good stuff with the hot sauce. I'd really like to get a bottle kind of deal. And, they have a little moment. Connor gives respect. Connor feels like he's only just starting. And this is another old quote from Connor. I think actually, maybe it's not older. Maybe it's just like from media day. Connor's talking about the money. What the hell? The money comes, but the belts come and go. Oh, the money and the belts come and go. Highlights will live on forever. I'm here to paint a masterful picture that I can watch with my kids. This is actually, now I remember, it's after
Right.
He's like walking out and he's getting like a little interview from Ariel, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
And he's, he's making a highlight reel is basically what he's saying here.
For sure. Yeah, that comes in a little second. But yes, this was where I also acknowledged what you've been saying all of this time, that yes, this is a very, very friendly lead up between Conor and Dustin to this fight. I said it makes sense since Conor was, of course, still riding high off the Cerrone fight. He has not hit the down portion, the downswing of the cycle yet. We talk about the
Mhm.
cycles. Conor is still in that sort of middle phase. You get the high of the win. Now you're at the middle stage where you can kind of just coast on good vibes. Something's going to bring him down and downswing him. And then, of course, we'll talk more about how that affects him going forward. But yes, this is a very friendly lead up. They are certainly chummy at this point. Yeah, he's because Dustin was saying, I think, talking about Conor's with the whiskey visit with Proper 12. And he's like,
Mhm.
oh, but you're doing good with the hot sauce. I'd like to get some, I'll get you a bottle. Bro fist kind of moment there, whatever. Everything's going good. The thing that you left out, though, Chase, and this, I laughed so hard knowing what we know now. It's Dustin Poirier. It's, I believe, Dana in the middle. It's Conor McGregor. And then when that portion ends of the conversation and you start hearing Conor talking, there's a slow zoom out. Did you see who was on the end of the table there?
Mm-mm.
It was Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler was on
Nice.
the dais with them, and they have this slow zoom in on Michael Chandler sitting there silently and just watching his face as the two of them are talking. Obviously, that is very, very funny in hindsight now, knowing what we know about what Michael Chandler would go on to do in his own white whale quest that he did not succeed at with getting the fight with McGregor, of course.
What a callback, man. What a foreshadow to what never became. That is
It's almost
unfortunately.
and almost like serendipitous by accident, because I mean they couldn't have predicted. I don't know, maybe by the time they were editing he might have already started that quest. I don't remember like that portion of the
No,
timeline, but
no.
yeah, probably not, I would think. So like, yeah, I think just fortuitous in that moment, but definitely hilarious knowing what we know now. But yes, you are correct. It goes on to the quote, the money and the fame, they come and go, but the highlights live on. Again, more saying the right thing in humble mode until the actions say otherwise. And that is always what you got to wait for with Conor McGregor, is just, all of the things sound and look good, but what's going to be the inciting incident to throw it all into a tailspin.
The ending portion too, he says, I conquered it. I'm just gonna conquer it again. That's what the double champ does, so it's kind of fun portion to end there. Connor's still on this active quest to make you believe that he is the most dedicated fighter that has ever existed in the game of martial arts, so
And this
I
fucking documentary trying to do it as well.
Yeah. So, okay, now we're 2 days from the fight. Connor is at 161.5 pounds currently. Excuse me. We're going to work out first, and then we're going to cut later. And then obviously, Ariel gets a brief moment. And this is for a documentary, or excuse me, a docu-series that maybe not many people are going to be watching, that are like casual kind of deal, that are just going to tune into here. The weight cutting portion is very good for those people who end up watching it. But them have to getting to episode 3 for you to get some actual MMA lore kind of deal of like what specifically mean. I don't necessarily think it's as impactful as it could have been if somebody would have learned about it that in the first. It's like, okay, then people kind of get the deal, but you would have to already kind of understand to make it this far, I think, and then Ariel just breaking it down for you. It is helpful, but I feel like we could have had this in either a different docuseries or earlier in the show just randomly. So we get Ariel talking about weight cutting, why people do it. We cut weight so we can rehydrate and we can have advantages over our opponent when they don't weigh as much as us, yada, yada, yada. So Connor cutting this weight, and, we get to see him doing the sweat manipulation, as I believe, water manipulation is how they call it, and this is where you get the mental game. Connor talks a lot in this docuseries about the mental game, mental fortitude, and losing his mind, whatever you want to say. So he's locked in, losing all this weight, sweating. D is by his side. And it was actually before we even learned, and I didn't want to bring it up, and I wasn't until we learned. I was like, yo, D is looking like COVID is feeding her well. Oh, brother. When I saw her, I was like, holy crap, dude. This is what happens when rich people get to stay away from everybody, Like, but no. D is pregnant again. She's by Connor's side still, though. And I think that
Yeah,
is very key to note.
we won't know that for a while going forward. They don't say anything about that at that point. But yeah,
Yes,
because I thought the same thing. I didn't even I didn't put it in the notes. I didn't want to be overly rude. But yes, the not exactly the
correct.
most flattering shots of D in this moment here. But yeah, no, to address the point that you made about the weight cutting stuff. I agree with you. When we go over, what we always do at the end of this, when we, go over this like as an MMA film or documentary or whatever, that's the kind of stuff that maybe changes the score a little bit because you're right. At this point in episode 3, like, you probably could have just done without like any explanation for the more casual fans. Like, I mean, because if you're going to do it there and it's really the only instance in this series of any like actual MMA explanation, like
Right.
there's maybe a few minor other ones that you can point to say like that would be something for a more casual fan, but it really is one of the few that's actually like focused on for any length of time. So if that like it seems like an odd thing to just throw in here at this point, but I guess if they were saying that this weight cut maybe like it didn't seem like it was the craziest weight cut as far as like being difficult. It was certainly not easy, but no weight cut is like easy.
Mhm.
So yeah, this was it was kind of just there I guess for those casual fans, maybe didn't necessarily need to be there, but either way we're watching it all. And like you said, he's sweating it out. He's in the tent, and she's got the ice pack on his head, and I said the same thing. She's a good girl, man. I mean, like it is not lost on me that she is there through the good and the bad always. I mean, we talked about it after the Habib loss, I think, when they're backstage and he's kind of just sitting there and like they're all just sort of like taking it in or whatever, and she's there too. She's there through all of this. She was only not there when it is intentional that she is not there, and I think that
Correct.
just yeah, it speaks to her. It speaks to her character as a companion to Connor. So I do like that.
No, absolutely. And then so the next portion, obviously, after we cut all the weight, we are now weighing in. Connor's the first to the scale. 155 pounds. It's official. He made championship weight. That's key to note that Connor wanted you to know championship weight. So there you go.
Sure. And also this I thought that of the artistic elements of this as a film piece, this was a great looking shot of this weigh-ins, because what you see in this moment is it's kind of the camera is off into the back and you're looking out over the ballroom and the scale is kind of off to the side and you're seeing like the scale and Connor on it and then like the audience over to like the left hand side. And because it's COVID, hearing like the silence of the room, so to speak, like the fact that it is, is basically just a small number of people. It's such an enclosed environment, a very big environment, but still a small number of people and relatively silent compared to Madison Square Garden or anywhere else that Connor would be at. I thought it was a really great contrast, showing the dramatic change of scope that Fight Island was. So I thought that this was a very good job by the documentary series team to set this up the way that they did.
No, absolutely. And then of course Dustin is up next. 156 makes it. Fight is official, and then they both walk off. And then this is where bro, they're best fucking friends. Hey, good job, Dustin. You too, bro. Like
Yeah.
listen, that's it, brother, right there. Exactly.
Con-
They actually did do a knuckle touch. Yeah, they reached for it too. It wasn't walking by and passing. No, hey, I gotta. And then they went for it. So
As
this
I
is
said,
bro
that
stuff.
it's sad that this friendship won't last, though. I mean, but you're saying that you don't believe it. You're saying that you think
No,
that it's not, that the rest is for the show.
I think this is a perfect example of understanding that you could market not not necessarily not liking each other. Like I do think they're bros, like, but I have friends that, again, I've argued with people. The Call of Duty game chats were probably pretty fun at a time, like, so he knows how to market himself, whether they're bros or not. They know that if they had a little animosity, obviously we'll talk about it a little later, that they would build something and they can keep it going rather than hugging and shit after the fucking, fight, like Strickland and Hamzat. Of course, they were able to keep in different circumstances when it comes to the trilogy and things like that. But we will definitely get into it. So
Sure.
now we're at the ceremonial weigh-ins, and we get a voiceover where, does Connor still have the hunger? And it was desperation that started it. Connor he started martial arts because he was desperate. uh, but that's wrong, because he loves the competition of martial arts. That's what actually drives him. it's competition, and love and purpose. And again, Connor feels driven to these things. It speaks to him. He's here for a reason when it comes to martial arts. It's not because of this. It's because, it was put here for me, kind of deal. So I don't know.
So
Connor just
much.
always having interesting things.
Yeah, and it's just so much love of the game, and that is
Yeah.
something that we're picking up here. A little foreshadowing for the next episode where it is just so hammered home. But yeah, the coaches all say, yeah, it's the love of the game, and I say, I believe that there's an element of that in Connor, which is genuine, but I do think it's probably a little bit more complex than that, coach. But either way, obviously the documentary presenting these things to you and interpret them as you will. So we do move on to fight day now. No fight footage I had in the notes here. Connor quietly limping off backstage. Oh yes, yeah, right. We go to fight day, and then we're getting it's almost a little Rashomon situation here. Connor, it says fight day. Connor quietly limping off backstage. Presentation, I said, done well here. Like, this was obviously, if you know what's happening as a fan, you'll know that we're skipping ahead in the timeline. It will eventually get to everything, but this is an interesting way to start this portion.
This is definitely something that could have been done, or not this specifically, but being a little more creative with the style of the docuseries. Not obviously we have time portions where we go back and forth, and we go back, and we got the social media around us, but this specifically right here, I thought was it kind of kept you engaged, So we actually go into this was actually a really good shot. So the empty arena is to start, and then you have the shot of Connor's like locker room or whatever, and then you start to see the teams flood in. I thought that was a pretty good portion here, and
Yeah.
then Connor arrives. Let's see, we get another young Connor clip before this as well. Connor is what does he say? You got to embrace what you're doing. You gotta love it, or what the fuck are you doing? If you don't love this shit, you gotta get out of here. And Connor's, once again, he could leave and be comfortable, but I'm driven for the legacy. I want every record, every belt, everything. And I'm like, all right, this is like again, you got to make you believe that this is the greatest athlete of all time when it comes to what we're saying. Like, he's got to be the Michael Jordan. He's got to take everything. He's got to own everything. Very good moment right here. And then this is where we get the immediate, because he walks out and then he walks back in, and it's like, well, he limps back in, and it's like, oh shit, he got fucked up. Like, damn.
Yeah.
Like, so it keeps you engaged. Like, what did this skip or something? Obviously you're like, whoa, let me lock in. So I really appreciated the creativity from the director here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you're right about that. This could have been the cold open right here if they wanted to, because if you recall in episode 1, we start off with him in the hospital, and that's where
Yeah.
you get the McGregor Forever clip. That's not going to come into play for quite some time. So it's like this could have been a good cold open moment here instead of the retirement stuff, which would have been just fine right after this. But regardless, that is not how they portrayed it, but it is very well portrayed here. I agree. This is a good engaging portion of the series here. And so now we're backstage after after the traumatic incident here. And of course, I said the irony of Michael Chandler highlights playing on the TV as he limps by in defeat is not lost on me for sure. Michael Chandler playing a little bit more of a part in this than I think he or anyone else would have expected, but it's small, obviously. I mean, it's just in hindsight that it becomes interesting, but yeah, he's looking at Michael Chandler or like, he's not looking at it, but Michael Chandler is the highlights of his fight are, him on the cage with the flag on his shoulders is on the TV while he's limping past in defeat now. And of course, now we are starting to get the actual fight footage. And it was
Well,
pretty good. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, well, it bounces back and forth kind of. So you start to get some highlights of round one, and then it cuts back to the locker room where Connor's like in agonizing pain,
Yes.
and then
Yeah.
which I thought they might have done a little too much of the show. Like at first, show him walking, limping back in, that's cool, but have a fight footage and then going back to him talk, like screaming about his leg, going back to him. I mean, it's fine, but maybe it was doing a little too much at that point, because you just get to go back and see him get kicked in the leg. You get to come back, talk about how his leg hurts, go back, get kicked in the leg, come back, he gets ice on
Yeah,
his leg.
yeah, I think I kind of I'm okay with that because I think that sets up episode 4 very well, and of course we'll go into why that is. But yeah, I mean, and obviously, like, seeing the footage of the fight and knowing what happened in that fight, the calf kicks obviously a huge factor, and Connor is feeling the pain like crazy backstage as it's being iced. I think that I liked it from an MMA film perspective because like that level of punishment, like I don't think that you can really fully understand it in the moment. Like when people talking about, like we hear it all the time with people, oh, just take some leg kicks. I mean, Jesus, did he really get TKO'd from leg kicks? Come on, bro.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. I mean, you see Conor McGregor in the backstage after having that leg pulverized, and you realize just like the level of intensity of that pain when they're not in fight mode at that point. So I was okay with all of this portion of it. Actually, I thought it was another kind of one of those moments of humanizing Conor, which you don't get very often. So I appreciated that from this documentary. Then of course we get into round two, and Dustin is continuing to punish the leg, karate stance, no check kick. I have in the notes, which obviously is a big factor of all of this. And then we're still talking through like the portions of the fight itself here. And I said, looking back at that extended combination from Dustin that finally did the trick, that finally finished this fight, what an absolute thing of beauty that was. Rarely do you see that level of sustained striking in sequence, with the accuracy and effectiveness that Dustin had on that. So it was really nice to see it presented the way that it was here.
I agree with you, because that portion where you're watching the slow motion of that sequence, the finishing sequence, because it's not just, you get the clip and it's obviously, Dustin hits him and he knocks him down, but like the entirety of what happens there, once Connor is immobilized, Dustin goes straight to work. And what is key about this clip, and why I think it's so interesting to note, because it's not just Dustin that's awesome in this clip. Connor is not getting hit by a lot of them. Like, it is actually a very good for Conor McGregor to have no mobility other than just, doing body, kind of dips. He deflects and rolls with a lot of punches. And that's exactly why Dustin had to throw a lot of them. He had to make sure that he landed some in it. And then the one that lands like right on the top of the head was just, it was awesome. And this sequence, of course, seeing it in slow motion, you really do see um, the eye coordination from Conor McGregor. Like, he really was seeing the punches, he was seeing them. But at the end of the day, when you don't have two legs to move out of the way, eventually, if somebody is able to have that enough flurry, they can catch you. And Dustin really he has that ability, and that's just really what happened here. Connor, it goes back to Connor in silence, looking at the highlight or whatever, and he's like, "It's my leg was dead as fuck." I didn't have anything. He gets the crutches and he hobbles out. What's actually interesting to note here is this was back when they had like the post fight interviews, right? So like they both are like chilling out now. Dustin's just at the booth, answering some questions. Leg kicks were key, calf kicks were the story of all interviews. That's exactly what you see, like 4 different versions of him saying the calf kicks, aerial calf kicks, this guy calf kicks, and that's fine, cool. And then you get a Connor clip saying it's fine, it's 1-1. We're definitely gonna go again. And then this is where you get another instance of them being absolute bros, because they shake on it, respect, good fight, man. Appreciate you. We'll definitely regroup with Justin, and we're going to come back and do it again, So you guys cannot prove me wrong. I saw this originally and people tried to tell me that I am dumb for thinking they're friends. Guys, they're bros. Absolutely.
Yeah, no. So just to talk it through, another rare glimpse of Connor defeated here. Back when they're backstage, still he's talking it through with his team, and you do feel for him. I mean, you feel for him, I'd say, as much as you would feel for any fighter going through a traumatic loss. And obviously throughout the course of being with him in this documentary series, it's humanized him to a level where you have that level of empathy for him. And then I said, what you're talking about with the post-fight presser, I said, I give Connor a lot of credit for getting his leg eaten alive and getting knocked out and still making it to that post-fight presser. So, that's impressive.
I was also going to say the same thing. It's like, for what it was, I mean, he could have been airlifted, he could have done anything to get to the hospital, but no, he hobbled out there on that crutch, and he did go to that. He did do that. He gave Dustin his props,
Absolutely.
Professionalism at its best.
And that's what I was going to say too. Humble in defeat, Connor congratulating Dustin on his victory. You are correct. They are BFFs. When does the heel turn happen again is what I had in the notes. And we will, of course, talk about that coming up. But yes, in this moment, you like it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny that there is a level beyond just professionalism with these two, that there is like a little bit more of a friendship dealy going on there. Now, from Dustin's side of things, and this we're definitely going to talk about in the next episode, if you recall, and they did a very good job of strategically talking around this. Conor had said he was going to be donating to Dustin's charity. And that will just get glossed over in the next episode when things start to go a little bit of a different direction. But I think from Dustin's perspective, Conor's being pretty respectful at this point. They may have had their little dust up before the first fight, but everything's going okay. And Conor is maintaining this level of contriteness. Obviously, something's going to get flipped on that switch coming up.
And so this next portion is awesome because we obviously talked in the beginning and we've talked continuously about them avoiding certain things to show that doesn't fit the narrative. So Conor is rewatching the fight at home. The vibes are low. He's sitting on the couch. We get a young Conor interview where again, if you know where this ends up, this means nothing. So Conor talks down, talking about losing. It's part of the game. Break down what went wrong, correct mistakes. I never wanted to be the person who couldn't accept defeat. I've seen it before, and it never goes well. And it's like, motherfucker, why do you say
Bro.
everything that you contradict yourself with? Like, god damn it.
And that's where I kind of get to the point in my mind of thinking that the docuseries is almost intentionally making it so that it is a little bit of a chess match with the viewer, where it's like, we're going to put that in there. If you know the full story, you know what that actually means and like what that actually in the bigger context, how that plays in. So yeah, it's an interesting bit of setups here and a lot of detective work that you have to do in your own mind to line everything up with what you know to be reality. But what I say, at least from the perspective of what they're showing us here, Conor always in the immediate, I'll get it back mindset. Resilience is one of his better attributes for sure, but how many times and how many successful times? That's the question that I have.
I actually feel like this docuseries is doing a disservice to Conor McGregor and the organization and Dustin Poirier for that matter. Because when you get to the portions that we're obviously talking about that have been left out of this, nobody's going to think that they need to go watch further on past the performance, like, oh, broke his leg, damn, turn it off. And it's like, well, when you find out exactly what happens, later on, of course, and after that, I mean, if you don't get to see that as the casual viewer, what's going to make you want to go back and watch that portion of it, or the things that they cut out that you don't know you missed? You're not gonna go watch the McGregor clips anymore. That's not going to get him views,
Well, Chase, now you are getting to the point of why bias in documentaries is a major issue, is because
Mm.
we have the luxury of being people who experienced the time frame of all of this. 50 years in the future, if anybody ever who's not alive for this comes back and is like, man, I really wanted to know what Conor McGregor was like back then. This is going to be the presentation that they get without all of the other portions of the reality. So that's kind of why I've been stressing the things that I've been talking about in our review of all of this. Is it's like you are getting a sanitized version, but within the sanitized version, it's still interesting from our perspective as people who do know the details to kind of piece the elements together that are not included. But that only goes for us.
No, absolutely.
And so people like us, obviously, you guys out there who are listening.
Right, but and so this next part is interesting because they really kind of gloss over this as well. The entire story that we've had for season or for episode 3 is that he hasn't been, or episode 2 and 3 is that he hasn't been able to get a fight. We've been needing a fight, we've been waiting for a call on a fight, and we haven't got it. But all of a sudden, rematch for May or June is just a go for Dustin. I mean, we could just get a fight in 2 more months. Like fuck it, like we hurt our leg, but we're getting the rematch set up right now. Like so, I find it weird that they didn't acknowledge that, oh yeah, we jumped into this next fight relatively quick. After he got his leg butchered, we jumped right into training. So
yeah, I mean, well, I think that's why it is an interesting element of the end of this, because I said, after that quote basically is really where this episode ends without a clear setup for the next one, and knowing the timeline, that's like, okay, well, why we know what the next step in the process is here. So you didn't bait the hook at all with any of that. Kind of a strange way to sort of just thud the end of this episode, but that is the end of the episode basically here. So, I mean, we'll talk about the setup for everything in the next episode, but did you have anything else for the end of this before we close it out?
no, I am actually, like I said at the beginning, like these last two episodes really center around one matchup in particular, so it kind of just feels like one long continuation, so I feel like that's maybe why there's just an uneven break here. It's like, well, we don't really have a good stopping point because it's the same story,
And
so
that is an interesting point. Yeah, I'll save my overall thoughts on that for the next episode wrap up. But so overall review for this episode, Chase, episode 3 that we've just concluded here. What are your thoughts?
this one was not my favorite. It was a little all over the place. The ending portion, I think, where he walks in limping, I think that was the moment that I was like, ah, man, they got me for a good moment. Like, that was a good filmmaker decision, of course. The COVID stuff really bogs down this fucking documentary, man. Like, it unfortunately locks it into a time period. This could have been the McGregor Forever, but this is the McGregor COVID era. Like, that's unfortunately what kind of becomes. So when you start talking about the bubble and shit, I'm watching him get mouth swabs. I don't give a fuck. Get me to the fucking fight, brother. Like, I mean, in a sense of, like, if this was any other time period, I don't care about how he's getting prepared to, like, get into the fucking hotel. Like, get me to the fights kind of deal. An extended portion of this episode had to be the COVID stuff because that's just unfortunately what happened during that time. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
But
fair. I mean, this is for me. I guess it's just kind of speaks to maybe the differences of what we look for or want to be seeing in this documentary series. Because for me, this was the most interesting of this series so far. I thought I was like, a lot of the compelling elements of Connor's life are on display here, even if they are very heavily manipulated to conceal the bad side of Connor. So, basically, I kind of talked about this throughout all of this. So I'm rehashing a little bit here, but I said sifting through the spin of the series and reading between the lines is tiresome, but overall the action of this episode made it tolerable. And I think that, that goes back to, like, when they're on the plane. I thought that was an interesting kind of view into that portion of his life. Just a couple of little, like, on the boat, the stuff with the family, like seeing that side of his life, I thought was interesting, even if you have to, again, contextualize it within your own mind, because the docuseries is not going to do it for you.
I think the best moments, and I actually will take back what I said. This episode is not as bad as I'm making it seem, because the initial portion where he's watching Justin Gaethje versus Habib, I think that portion was awesome in this episode. The
Yeah.
best portions, I think, are when you have Connor and you're reading the emotions from him, because he's a very expressive person. A lot of the times, the vibes are low, the vibes are high. You can feel the energy from Connor when you can feel the life is, like, kind of sucked out of him. So this episode is not bad. I think those two portions were really my favorite. The Habib portion, where, again, at the end of the night, where he just sits down and eats alone, like, just to sit with his thoughts. I really, I resonated with it. It was good.
Yeah, and that's yeah, exactly. Because like I had said in the first two episodes, I'm like, if we were just focusing solely on the camp and the fights, then it really is a glorified embedded. Even with this, it still basically is that. But, like,
Right.
if it's going to be that, I need more of the human stuff to latch onto to make it more of an interesting story. Because, having watched this sport for as long as I have, I've seen fight camps, I've seen lead ups to fights. Like, even if it is Connor and there are certain uniquenesses to his circumstances, it's not interesting to me anymore. Like, I just don't particularly care about that portion of things. Or if I do care about it, if I suddenly decide that I want to, I can see that literally any day of the week from any fighter on the planet. So I need more of the reality. And even if it's being filtered through a very biased lens, I find the stuff that was presented in this episode to be more of that. So this was my favorite episode so far.
Fair. That's very good to hear. Yeah. So I think episode 4 rolling into it'll be very good as well. But
Well,
is there anything else you want to go before we move
no,
on?
go ahead, please.
Let's take another moment. Shout out to the chat real quick. Of course, everybody being awesome, sticking with us. I hope the press conference was great. Once again, at the end, we can go ahead and watch some clips if you guys want to watch the face off. If Connor has a very funny moment that you guys want us to watch, just make sure to drop the link. Double check us at the end and make sure we get to that for you. But let's make a good shout out once again. Bleeding Edge, Sam. Let's see, we got Hydra. I saw 10-7, of course, and Carlos was in there. JS Gaming. Appreciate you for stopping by, bro. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like and keep it up. You keep it up, brother. You keep it up. And so, absolutely, all of you, awesome. I appreciate you guys.
Hell yeah, I appreciate you as well. Thank you guys for hanging out with us for this one. As we get into episode 4 here, of course, episode 4 is titled "Till the Day I Go Out," and we start off with Connor's "Allow me to reintroduce myself" moment here. Another one of these with old footage of Connor again saying who he is. You know, the interviewer is talking to him and asks him what he fears in this moment, and he says, "I don't really think about things like that." And I said, that is something I definitely believe about Connor.
Yeah, and this is actually a really good moment from Connor. It's really funny. He actually opens up a vlog, and he's talking a little bit, and you actually really can't really fucking hear what he's saying. It was really hard to hear, but Connor doesn't want to be anything. He's already where he's at. Specifically, is a very good portion here. People are always wanting different. They want something. Connor has always had those things. He's never outwardly looked for something different than what has already been given to him, which I think is a very very honest thing. You should live by that. I think I really
Yeah.
appreciate that from Connor.
I had that in there too. I said that's a great answer. You know, he says, "Who do you want to be?" The guy asks. He said, "I don't want to be anything. I am everything I want to be." I said that's powerful. I actually
Yeah.
legitimately thought that's a powerful statement. Yeah, it continues on. I don't want anything. I have everything. Said quality soundbite, but a scary proposition when it's actually the truth, and you happen to be Conor McGregor.
Yeah, absolutely. But we get the McGregor Forever title. We get the day till the day I go out is what this episode is called, and then we get, of course, a social media roundup. And if you would like to make a point, I'll tell you, the Guru had 2 clips in this roundup here, so that's how
Bro,
it is.
the fucking guru made this thing SMH in the notes. Yeah, no, shout out to him. Look, I mean, shout out to the documentary series people for putting him in there. Honestly, it's like if you obviously a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about the guy, but he is a major voice in the space. So regardless of your thoughts about him, honestly, I really they kind of kept him pretty tame throughout all of this. He didn't really like the stuff he said wasn't like anything of the guru's level of inflammatory
Right.
statement that he's capable of. So his inclusion makes sense here. But yes, Guru beanie and all in the Conor McGregor docuseries. So Digital Media Roundup tells us that this was the worst Conor performance, talking about the Poirier rematch, and that he's not the same guy anymore. I says it's fascinating because at the time I truly thought this was the legitimate end of Conor mania, him getting knocked out. I thought like, oh, surely now this is going to be it all over. The leg snap was maybe the nail in the coffin, but Dustin's knockout I always thought would be the thing that killed the star power. So this media roundup kind of speaking to, at least at the time, what I thought to be the truth. Like this is the conversation surrounding everything. Surely people are again, knowing all of the other surrounding elements at the time, surely this would be the thing that I like, oh, well, obviously he's washed now, why would anybody care anymore? He got knocked out.
Yeah, but see, there's a difference. People making videos and commenting on that he's washed. It's not them not caring. Them not making a peep is being done with it. So having the social media roundup where everybody's talking about how washed McGregor is, that means there's still the hate watch available for his next 1 or 2 bouts. Like, so if they truly didn't care, they just wouldn't fucking say anything. So
It was certainly a good point, and that I guess is just part of the cycle of star power in general. Is just where that where the interest level and why the interest level is at where it's at any given time, right? Because you're saying, I mean, like I guess I don't come from a frame of reference for that, just being a fan of the fighting. So it's like it's very rare that I'm ever like legitimately hate watching, regardless of the
hmm,
person. It's I mean certain instances, but very rare. And so it is, but like from an average or more, a different perspective, I guess it is interesting. It's like, some people that might have been like mega fans at one point now being like, oh man, that guy is so washed. Like, now I'm gonna have to watch him, get knocked out again or lose again or whatever, So it is interesting that may change, but the interest level still being there. It's a good point.
yeah, and then so now we are in the UAE 4 months after the rematch, of course, and Connor's working out while we get to hear more of the haters overlap over top of us, talking about how this is again the most washed Connor that we've ever seen. Max fucking Kellerman, guys, Jesus Christ, this guy drops the bar, which he should never be talking MMA. Let me let you guys know this, but he drops the hang it up line on Conor McGregor, bro. That is fucking rich, my guy. So either way, very funny stuff. there's the coach over talking, has a voice over Connor's coach, of course. And this is a very good point as well, because this is something that I have always liked about martial arts, is that there's something primal about it. When you lose and you think to yourself, if there was no ref, like, I'd be dead. He would have killed me. And it's like that, when the bell rings, you have to understand, like, do you want to kill this guy or not? And that's, some of these guys really take it to that extreme, whether that's just the coach trying to talk his fighter up. Some people, maybe not all of them, but there's a guy out there who treats this like life and death. So it is a good point. You never know what you're stepping up into. You always got to, have respect for your opponent and understand that anybody is capable of anything at the professional level. And we've seen that time and time again, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I said that is a great point. That is his trainer there. It's Colin Byrne, I believe, is his trainer that's talking in that moment. And yeah, I said that fighting is a crazy thing. It just,
Mm.
in and of itself, point blank, period. I mean, you're exactly right. Like it is primal. If the ref wasn't there, you would be dead. I mean, like, these are like the truths of the sport that go way beyond the trappings of legitimate competition, which, for people, because I'm certainly one of those people. I said it during the Tom Aspinall situation, where people talking about him going out on his shield and being a warrior and all that. And I'm like, this is a $7.7 billion sports industry that he is a part of, right? It's like, sure, that is certainly a perspective that you can have. And I'm, speaking to myself even in this moment, but
Hmm.
at its most primal, at its most foundational level, it is a crazy fucking thing. It is two people going and ripping each other apart. Like that is about as basic as it gets as human beings, as the animals that human beings are. So I thought that his coach was making a really good point there as well.
And so Connor is he's doing 2 sessions a day, his head down, and he's fully focused. And this is an interesting portion, because they're talking about how Connor's, soul searching. He's still, or actually Connor's talking about this specifically. He's talking about him still soul searching. He's looking to learn, look to learn from the tough times. He learned a lot about hardships and come back better. And then he feels like he's glowing again. So Connor, again, still being all over the place from episode 3, with all the emotions going up and down, he's still in this phase where it doesn't seem where he has got everything. He may be telling you that, but now we're in another point where he's still searching. He's soul searching for that peace. I got to get to that level I need to be. It's like, I thought you were already there. I thought you already have, brother. I thought you don't want to do, I don't know. So it just feels a little contradictive
Well,
once
and
again.
again, exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it's the cycles, it's the duality that you see with this guy, and what I say to that, because you're right, he's talking about the criticisms that come from winning and losing, and Connor needing to find himself essentially, and it's like, yeah, this is a wild thing for sure, and it does not happen in a vacuum. So, like, I would say that, like, and again, what we are being denied from this docu series, and this, I just tip the hand just a little bit. This is one of the most reductive episodes of the series. This episode here,
Mm.
this is certainly the start of it. But what I say is, like, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's like what you find from Connor is that if there's any major, I mean, amongst many, of course, but if there's any most overarching criticism or thing that he needs to improve in himself, it is finding balance. And it's always seems to be elusive to him. Just throughout all of this, you see elusiveness. It's always fleeting. When he's on top, that's fleeting. The feeling of hunger, getting back to the top, is always fleeting because he's constantly in this cycle and can never find balance.
Yeah. And then so, Connor obviously talks about this is a team effort, but at the end of the day, it's a solo journey. Yeah, aside from the team and support, he is the one that has to go in here and do this, and then he walks off and gets into an expensive car where the door opens from the opposite of how yours would normally, obviously rich people things. Then you get a coach over, voiceover talking about Connor wants nothing more than the rematch, and he runs into adversity, not away from it. And then the fight is just official. Now we get a social media roundup again. They're really speed running the end of this here kind of quickly, but whatever.
Yeah, and what you'll come to find throughout the course of this episode is exactly what you said at the end of episode 3, is that this is basically just a continuation of the Poirier saga. So it's
Yeah.
like it's almost unfortunate that this had to be a separate fight because it's like it would have been really like it would have wrapped everything up in a nice bow if it had been 1, 2, 3, and then that's all you had. But this is like four, so it's kind of dragging three out. It's like an extension of
Yeah.
three.
This is
Um,
3.5. Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So like, yeah, what I said about the solo journey aspect that he mentioned there is like going back to my other point about the, like the Madonna example and the live entertainment stuff. That's the reverse of that. It's like it does take 100 people to make it happen, but at the end of the day, she's the one that has to sing the songs. So like, in Conor's world, that's the exact same thing. And then when you have the added level of there being a defeat and this adversity, and then this constant push and pull that he's always going through, it does kind of synthesize down into himself at the end of the day, where it's like, yeah, all of this other stuff is all these surrounding elements, but you take all of that out and you filter it down. What's left at the end of the day is a man and his thoughts.
Absolutely. And then so of course we get another social media roundup. Is there anything key from this portion that you have anything to say?
No, yeah, I think that I also had, basically just going into that portion, just saying, similar stuff about, this destructive cycle that his life is on, continuously showing itself. And then, like you said, the rematch is just official. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. Yeah, it's happening. Yeah, great. Okay, we're now in rematch territory. A whole bunch of time just cut out immediately. Another portion of this docuseries jumping a little bit around a lot. Another thing that's going to be prevalent in this episode later on. But yeah, I don't think that there was really too much. He said Connor says that he doesn't care about the criticism. He only cares
Mm.
about his team and the people around him. I think that's going into the next portion here. So yeah, the criticism doesn't bother him. It's about him and his team and the people around him. His actions consistently prove that to be false, I say. He also says that he believes that changing gyms and teams is a sign of weakness because you
Mm.
build your team with a belief that a belief that cannot waver. So you have your team, you build your team, and you cannot waver from the belief that you put in your team. This also, I think, is provably false.
Um, whether it's true or false is a different story, but I think Conor McGregor saying it, hearing it, it's like, damn, if it is true, Wellmaker, fuck. He's fucked, brother.
But that's my point, though, is that I think that you've seen it now. Connor having that belief, I don't think is necessarily like wrong. I mean, he himself Connor is a person that constructed his world and continues to do that on a daily basis, right? So it's like if that's how he wants to view things, fair enough. But what we are now seeing is that maybe there's this construction is not as foundationally sound as it might could have been.
Just as a side note, and we can obviously talk about this at a different time, preferably probably, in the Discord or something. But if you leave your gym after 16 years, I do not know if that is the best move. But that's just my thought on the Israel Adesanya play right there. But of
Spicy
course,
take. Yeah, we'll have to talk about that elsewhere. But yes, I mean, but another good example. I mean, there are plenty of examples of people who have
right.
gone to different gyms and had better success. Connor not believing that is his choice to do so. But obviously, we have now seen in this docuseries up to this point, we have now seen 2 losses and 1 win. So just saying.
Some docuseries for the guy, isn't it? That it's all him
Oh,
getting battered.
we'll talk about that at the end for sure. But yeah, going into where we are now, we're 10 weeks out from Poirier 3, of course. The fight is official. 10 weeks out. Connor and his coach, John Kavanagh, are rewatching Poirier 2. He pulled a trick out of his pocket, says Kavanagh. We know that now. And I said the trick of systematically dismantling his opponent, that is particularly concerning if that is the thought process.
I had a problem with that line as well. Not for that reason, and maybe it kind of revolves into the same thing. It's like it's as if I said, "Oh, okay, he's gonna punch me in the face now." Well, fair play to him. I know that's coming. It's like what are you talking about? Like, yeah, he's gonna fucking kick him in the leg. Like, fair play to him. He got me on that one. It's like, brother, did you not understand game planning? Like, I don't.
This
You
is
didn't
the same.
train.
This is the
Yeah.
same guy who is consistently talking about being the displayer of the mixed martial arts. I mean, like kicks to the leg are about as mixed martial arts as it gets, brother. I mean, he didn't have some like, crazy spin kick or some fucking flying knee or some shit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I wrote it down as like how he pulled the ace out of his sleeve. It's like, brother, he kicked him in the leg, like, and you're acting like, well, fair play to him. He had a fucking bazooka. What am I supposed to do? Like, you would give the fair play nod if he just like cleans him, colds him. It's like, all right, he got me. Fair play to him. But like, brother, just getting kicked in the leg for a whole round and a half, fair play to him. That's just how we know we know what to do now. It's like, well, if you didn't get a fucking rematch, it doesn't fucking matter. You're supposed to know what to do the first time. Like,
yeah, prepared for anything kind of thing, I would say. And something as basic as leg kicks, you'd think would be among those. But yeah, then this goes right into another very questionable soundbite here where Kavanaugh again saying, no one loses better than Conor. I said, what a setup for how he acts after the leg break.
And we will obviously, and again, when you go to that quote, I don't want to take a loss like that. I don't want to be that guy who can't take a loss. It's like, well, now here you fucking go, brother. But either
Yeah.
way, we'll get into it. So Connor understands failure. It takes a special mindset to review and reassess the situation. Nobody takes a loss better than Conor McGregor is obviously great. And what they say is Dustin got a head start. It was 18-1 on the low kicks. It's like, yeah, I mean, that ain't really a hit. I mean, it ended up being that at the end, but like, you the fucking one who let him get there. Like, I
That
don't like, it wasn't a
that's
head start. It wasn't like you stood there and told him kick me 18 times in the leg. Like, I
That's
don't
exactly
know.
it. Like you'd think by leg kick number 3, number 5, number 7, number 12, number 13. I mean, like, like there you have all of those times to adjust and you don't do any of that. You're in corner. I mean, like I don't remember the cornering specifically, but was Kavanaugh sitting out there saying check the kicks? No, I don't think so. So,
But
yeah, it's not a head start. You're exactly right. It's a systematic dismantling of his opponent.
yeah, so it was just a first round win. That wasn't a head start. I mean, it was just a first round win for Dustin. But either way, so this is where we get a good line from Connor. He's like, he kicked the bloody leg off me, but I'm gonna kick him now. I'm gonna be the kicker. Karate Connor is coming back.
Yeah, what
Their
foreshadowing
game
that is.
plan, their game plan is to just do what Dustin did. I love this coach's mindset is like, all right, he kicked me in the leg. Well, I'm just gonna fucking kick him in the leg this time. It's like, this is your whole fight camp, brother. Like, oh my god damn.
So true.
So either way, then we get Coach talking about the difference between Connor and a lot of other people that had shown up to his gym, earlier on his career. The difference is Connor wouldn't stop showing up. Every session that Connor showed up for is as if he was training or as if he was going to win the UFC belt after that, training session, whatever you would like to say. And Connor has the mindset of someone who's winning the title every single day is kind of how he describes it. And whether that's actually true, whether some of those thoughts are fucking partying and others are titles, that's a different, but from the coach to think about his protege, again, it's all about the self-belief and the system that they have here. It's like Connor is the world here. We believe that he is the world beater. Whatever he says, I'm on board. I'm on board for it. So I've seen him show up time and time again, and he's got us here. There's no reason for us not to continue to trust him.
Yeah, and when he's talking, about specifically, he's like, people asking him, like, did you always know Connor was going to be that guy? And I think that at the time, like of that time frame that he's kind of referencing there, that's probably all very accurate to Connor. I do believe that like he was the guy early on in the career that was like, there all the time. He says, he's the guy that was constantly texting him, asking him questions after the training sessions, just locked in at all times, always training for that, with the champion mindset, like you said, every session is training for a belt kind of thing. I think at that time, it probably all was very true. Again, this is where Connor, like in his life and why it would have been very good in the documentary like this to show everything is to show the difference between that version of Connor and where he would eventually get to. But anyway, I digress. I've said it a million times.
But now it's 6 weeks to the fight. 6 weeks to go today. So now we're full of energy and fresh. We got a new baby. We got Conor McGregor popping babies out left and right.
So suddenly new baby, I said here. all of a sudden, there's a new baby. No mention of a pregnancy throughout any of this leading up to it. Of course, we referenced D earlier on.
They did say she was pregnant. Yeah, they did say she was pregnant in the thing. They said she's got a baby on the way back then. That's the only reason I brought it up is because they confirmed it. They were like, "Oh yeah, she's got a baby on the way." But
gotcha. I must have missed that point. Okay,
no,
fair enough
okay.
then. So yeah, all right. So then that's either way, we do get a baby sort of just dropped out of the sky on us. And I thought it was very funny that Connor is presenting this baby the way that an alligator wrangler is showing off baby gators at Gatorland. He is literally like has this baby in his arm, like kind of here, and he's just like kind of showing it to the camera like this. It's like, hey, look at this baby. I got a baby now. Check it out.
Yeah. Totally in dad mode. I'd love to see Connor this way. You know, this is what the documentary has told us he does it for. You know, he's doing it for his family, and he's going to continue working very hard. And you know, whether or not Junior is deceived by him thinking he's going to be retired 2 episodes ago or not, I don't know. But here we are. Connor is back to training leg kicks, but his leg's hurting. You know, so now
Yeah.
he's spraying the biofreeze on it. You know, the cryogen spray, whatever you want to call it. His shin is sore, which is actually pretty crazy to think about, that this is the footage that we're watching for what ends up happening. It really is like, fuck. They, not that they could have prevented it, but like the signs were here, you know.
Oh, brother, this is the most meaty portion of this episode
Mm,
is here and what we're leading into. So yes, you know,
yeah.
I said, uh-oh in the notes. Connor with some soreness on the shin, the foreshadowing of doom to come. Connor, then they tell us he has a deep bone bruise from all the kicking. His manager says, are we going to keep the fight on, or are we going to delay? And Connor's not one to put it off. You know, he wants to be in the fight. Obviously, if he accepts the fight, he wants to show up to the fight. And you know that was certainly true at this point. I mean, really, we that is really undisputable at this point. You know, Connor has always been, at least verbally, the guy that said, you know, if I have a fight, I want to fight, I'll fight anybody kind of guy. You know, he was definitely that guy at that point. And up until this point had never pulled out of a fight before. So it is interesting to see the team sort of in this odd position, like we got to figure out, can this fight go on? So that's that. But now this is really where it gets even more meaty. So we go to Los Angeles 6
Hmm.
weeks before the Poirier fight, you know, Poirier 3. We're hanging out with his surgeon who's going over just how screwed the ankle may or may not be, right? We're figuring this out. Connor has a deep bone bruise. His surgeon is giving him the details of this. I said, crazy to think they had all of this foreknowledge of the potential for an ankle break leading up to this fight. And then this doctor over here, I mean, like we'll talk about what happens later on in this episode with the doctor, but I said, so the doctor says you can keep training and fight, but you just got to put some pads on the ankle for the training. I said, God, this guy must have felt like the biggest asshole when the thing snapped in the cage. Hugged Connor and everything. They have a good
Mm.
relationship, but you know what's coming here. And this doctor letting it happen, I would think that's a crazy feeling.
Yeah, so you know, so it was a bone bruise, so not necessarily a fracture, which is where they were leading to think that it could have been. Which, if it would have been a fracture and then his leg breaks, it's like, okay, we could have saw it coming. But a bone bruise itself, I'm not going to say the doctor is faulty for this one, because like it was just a bone bruise. You can't tell me that if I get a bruise on my elbow, then my arm's going to break the next time I use it. You know?
Well, the difference between a deep bone bruise is not the same as like a bruise on
Yes.
your tissue, though. You know what I mean? That's they're different. The stipulations of those are different. From what I understand, I'm not an expert on this, but
Correct. But either way, so the doctor himself, you know, from what we were seeing here before, if you're watching this from the lens of like, okay, this is preventative. You know, his ankle hurts. Doesn't necessarily hurt when he's moving it around, but keep off of it for a few weeks. You know, if it gets worse over a few weeks, we're shutting the fight down. You're not going to be doing it. So we're going to make this makeshift wrap. We're going to put a fucking gel pad over your foot, and we're going to wrap it up. And then I did in this moment, because this is before the leg break. The other thing, in the moment, this is preventative. I'm like, the doctor does kind of seem like he is a mixed martial arts doctor. He's like, okay, if you want to throw kicks, you know, when you plant your foot, you know, you're gonna have so much pressure on it. You know, he did seem like he was understanding the inner workings of what he's going to be doing with his leg. You know, it's not like a doctor where he sat you down and he's like, so you're gonna be running a lot, huh? Like, you know, it's like he's going to be kicking somebody in his bone, you know.
oh
So
yeah, well,
it's interesting.
sure. And what I say to this too is that I don't even necessarily think that the doctor was wrong in the thought process. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, because like you said, I agree with you. I think that he is legitimately considering all of the specifics of what is going into a training camp and then the fight itself. So it's like I think that the thought process was generally correct, but it is one of those things that if there's any level of smoke in the area, to think that there could not be a fire if you let it continue in, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, had everything gone correctly in the fight, this would of course have been the exact right way to handle it. The fact that it did not is what makes it the, you know, it's like in football, it's like you go for the crazy play, you don't get correct. It's like the only time that it is a crazy idea is when it doesn't go right. But like, you know, in this, it's the same sort of thinking. It's like, you know, if everything went fine, it wouldn't have been an issue, but since it did not go right, now it's a major issue, you know?
And this is where I will obviously jump in and say that Connor has been very vocal that and the time that he was off resting from his ankle injury, he did exactly what the doctor said. There was no question about it. That's why we pull out of the testing pool. So there's your guy. There's your culprit who put him right on everything. Right there. That guy. So
Mr. Gear over here for sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. You are correct. But
or
so
or
yeah.
potentially that dude just doesn't even exist anymore because Connor got a new sports doctor. What would you say? You make the assumption for the audience member.
Well, it is
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, just to tip the hand a little bit, it is crazy that we are going to see this exact same surgeon at the end, later on in this thing. And so, obviously it wasn't one of those things that he instantly got taken out of the equation. So, I mean, maybe the relationship remains. I don't know. Hard to say.
Well, he was familiar with the injury and or the X-rays beforehand, and he was it's a little harder to go get a new surgeon when your leg's in half. So
And we'll certainly talk about that familiarity because he says something about that in the car. Well, yeah, we'll get to it. But
okay, fair. But now we go
any-
back to Newport Beach, Florida. Go ahead, thinker.
California, but yes, Newport Beach,
Oh,
California, and it is the McGregor Fast Gym. To be fair, it looks pretty nice. I mean, looks this is I guess a brand new facility here. Good looking equipment, but still real is what they said. Not a place to lounge, a place to work is the idea. What's up, Chase?
yeah, this part was really funny because McGregor's describing. He's like, the dungeon. This place. It's grimy, and I'm like, all these state of the art equipment that's all around here that have never been touched. Apparently, it looks
Sure.
shiny as shit in here. That's some dungeon, of course.
Well, and that's what I had said. I was like, if you're inherently going to lose some of the realness once you leave the trenches, I guess you make the upgraded version as real as you can, or you could just still train in the trenches. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
just because you have all this money doesn't mean that you need to get out of the warehouse gym. Like, like if you want that, but that is the interesting
make my
element
own
that
warehouse gym.
that's exactly what this is that it basically becomes like the Californiaized version of an MMA gym where it's like, yeah, it's still just real enough, but it's still state of the art. It's still, a place where you can, have your like your $8 waters and stuff.
Conor McGregor, honestly, he could have taken notes. He could have stopped by the gym that John Jones had in the cage. Just
That
saying,
is
that's the
fucking
dungeon.
hilarious. That is so funny that you say that because that literally was what I was thinking about when I was writing that out. When that note, I was like, there are legitimate dungeons out there that you could just be in.
Yeah,
Even at, and I mean, John Jones is actually a good example. Now, obviously, The Cage is a fictional series, but like a John Jones type character, even in that world, was supposed to be. He played himself, so I mean, like he
yeah.
was supposed to be himself. John Jones training in a facility like that. That if you want real, you can get real. You don't need to have this facsimile of real.
I think this just goes back to the first episode, where Connor's talking about how there was no mixed martial arts in Ireland, but obviously he had to have trained somewhere. So he's like, "There's just no dungeons in California. I just gotta make my own, man. Like I don't know what to tell you."
I'm sure that
So
there are plenty of dungeons in California in many, many ways. But either way, this is what it is. It is Connor's facility, McGregor Fast. It's nice, but it's not a place to lounge, even though it looks like it could legitimately be a lounge. But either way,
absolutely,
so now we're
5 weeks.
5 weeks out. Yes, 5 weeks out from Poirier 3. We're in a huge California mansion, and Connor says he's leaving the girlfriend at the time. He's leaving the girl and the kids at home, locked the fuck in for this fight.
Absolutely, and he's looking through photos of his kids, and he's just having a good time. He's like, here, they're at home. Here you go. Here's a picture. You see them. They're just not here. Having a good little moment. But it's now time to focus on the fight. Family stays home. Connor goes to work, and this is where you get Connor riding a bike, and then you get to see him doing feints and shit. And I'm like, brother, like, just ride the fucking bike, bro. Like, you going to hit something. You're doing too much. Like,
Yeah, he's getting on his Tony Ferguson there a little bit, but yeah, no, I've always said, I mean, this is actually an interesting juxtaposition between his other pre-fights, with the wife and the kids around all the time. I mean, he generally has a lot of people around, which always seems very distracting. We talked about this in the Smashing Machine, where the girlfriend there is Dawn is coming back and kind of bugging Mark before the fight, and we were saying even that is a little bit too distracting in the moment, and he's kind of like
yeah.
shooing her away. McGregor, with all this team and people and everybody around, it would seem to me that this is the better way to go. But obviously, he's the fighter. It whatever makes the most sense for him, I guess.
I think what also is key about this is it's not necessarily Connor choosing to leave the family at home. It's that they have a newborn baby that she needs to take care of. This is so, I mean, It's like Connor's got to lock in. The family can't come. It's like, brother, she just had a baby like 4 weeks ago. Like literally, it's still pink. Like I don't crazy, but
Yeah, you would think that that would be one of the major points there, but then just also knowing the way that this family operates with the amount of money that they have, sometimes, they'll bring the mobile nursery if they need to, kind of thing,
they'll just get the incubator. They'll just drop it in the pod and just go on about their week.
I mean, they'll literally just rent out the neonatal ward of a hospital if they need to, kind of thing. It's just one of those crazy things. But either way, he decides that this is the way to go, and I say power to him on that one. They also talk about now they've expanded the variety of techniques. The mixed martial artist over here, I say, I don't remember him getting crazy creative in this fight before the break, however. So I don't know if all of those expanded techniques showed very much, but maybe in certain instances.
Well, a variety of checking kicks. I mean, it could have just been that, but they didn't actually do that. There was no check. But either way,
Right.
so he's got no pain. He's finding the left leg. He's the master. You have to master rehabilitation is what is key at this point in your career. Or else you'll be here today, and you'll be gone tomorrow. And fair play to Connor because there's been a lot of people who have came and gone in the span that Connor has been rehabilitating from a broken ankle that we'll obviously talk about. But like he's still relevant for some, I mean, not for some reason. Obviously, we're watching all the reasons why, but it is what it is. So
Yeah, no, that is an
crazy.
interesting and funny point that you make there. That people have came and gone in the time that he's been gone. But yeah, no. So that is all true, and I do think there is some validity to mastering the rehabilitation. I mean, people in this sport, how many times have we talked about people coming back too soon and that kind of thing? Literally, our friend Jeremy, who's a fighter, we're talking to him about he's going just on the tail end of an injury, and every time that we talk about it, I say the same thing to him: make triple sure that you are 100% to come back. So I do think that
Yeah.
there is validity to that thought. But then, we go on to coach saying that leaving the wife and kids at home unleashes the beast. There's more testosterone in the air.
Yes.
Poirier is going to pay for the wife and kids not being around. I said, yeah, Poirier is going to pay for this vacation from the family. But
No,
I don't know.
absolutely. Yeah.
I think that
Jeez.
is one of those things that maybe single people think, but people who actually have the family have a more of a different view on. Because I always feel I feel that way every time that we see people crying on the Ultimate Fighter, where it's like they have to leave their family home for a little while. It's like, dude, it's a couple weeks. You're going to be back with them, but again, I'm not in that situation, so I don't have the frame of reference.
Absolutely. But either way, now we are 1 week until the trilogy. If you guys didn't keep up, we have been 2 time skips until the fight, basically. Like, I mean, this one is just speed running. Because what's funny too, and maybe they had an alternative cut of this with the portions that are left out that we will obviously allude to later. Maybe once they read over or once they watch it, they were like, cut that out a little bit, put some more fluff in there. This can't be. That's not what I want the image to be on McGregor Forever kind of deal. So I'm not really too sure, but here we are 1 week from the trilogy. And last time the shin pads let him down. He felt too safe taking kicks. This is a high impact, high trauma sport. And then we get to see Connor getting the electrotherapy on his foot. And then we get another social media roundup for the haters.
Well,
And what do you
he he
think?
he says that he wants to train without shin pads to feel the pain of it. And I was like, I do respect that in a general sense that it's like, you do have to you have to internalize that trauma that he's talking about because it is a traumatic sport in that way. I mean, it's legitimately traumatic to your body. So I think that there is legitimacy to the way that he's viewing that. But of course, this and the note that I had prior to this is, it does hurt as a viewer seeing this level of preparation and training, knowing how this fight is going to play out. Of course, that goes into it as well in that instance. But yes, we see the electro pulse therapy on the legs with this level of focus on the shins, legs, and ankles. It's hard to say that they should have known, but they kind of did know from the surgeon's visit a little bit. It's tricky in Connor's position, is what I had said to all of this. Basically, what we had talked about just before about, it's like, how much could you have known? How much, if it's like, as I said, it's so much fire to be placed on that one area of the body for like, you know, the smoke not to tell you something, but it, you know, it is tricky. It's tricky to, you know, you don't want to be the guy that pulls out. You're a major star. I get all of this, you know.
It is absolutely remarkable. Of course, you know, the foreshadowing that we get here, but you have the instance where it's like, my shin pads let me down. You know, I wore them too much and I got hurt in the fight. Well, I took them off and I fucked my leg up before the fucking fight. So, like, it is just one of those things. Is like, you know, there's a double-edged sword in every choice when it comes to mixed martial arts. It's like you're going to have to inflict pain on yourself to be able to get to the position where you can inflict pain on others. That is inevitably an issue. You know, obviously things come with that territory. But
Yeah.
now, after that, again, like I told you, we're just 2 time skips from the actual fucking fight. So here we are, 3 days from the matchup. So we have a Stephen A. Smith interview. And he's asking Conor, why are you here? And Conor is telling him there's a lot left to do. And I'm still young. I still feel like I'm young in the game, is what he says. And he's the most dangerous. You know, this is the iconic quote: I break people's faces for money and bounce. You know, so I love that one, of course. Anything for you to add
Yeah,
here?
no, I mean, just, you know, it really is. This is Stephen A. Smith is definitely the interview where Conor is getting prodded the most. Obviously, if you know Stephen A. Smith, you know that this is pretty much his MO. He's you know, a tell it like it is kind of guy. One of these dudes who is gonna, you know, get to the point, ask the biting question, so to speak. But it's really the same fucking question at the end of the day. Conor, with everything you've already accomplished, why are you still doing this? We fucking get it. He's dedicated to greatness. I said stop, but this is only going to continue on in this episode. But yes, Steven is continuing to poke at Conor. Dustin saying that his drive to be there is what makes him more dangerous, which again, homie answer. You know, I said another homie instance of Dustin. But Conor, you know, navigating Stephen A. Smith as gracefully as he always does. I mean, you know, like this is because really this is a time where you are actually getting a little bit of pushback on Conor from a guy like Stephen A. Smith, but graceful as ever with his answers, I would say.
There's a part that Connor drops here, and this is once again the knowledge. Connor drops some gems sometimes. You know, he dropped he said, so I forget what Stephen A said, but either way, he says, you know, but guess what? I'm back, you know, and they don't tell you, but a loss is a secret recipe for success. And I'm like, man, that sounds so good. God damn it. You shouldn't have doubted Connor. The game is mine. And I'm like, man, he really does have a way of doing it, you know?
Always has the right thing to say. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that the actions can't always back those up. But yes, you are correct, because it's like the lead up to this fight, at least at this point, and that's another element of this episode with the way that they're presenting all of this, because we're going to get into some of the more unhinged behavior. In fact, that's what the critics in the media roundup were talking about. They were, you know, how much of Conor is the shell of his former glory kind of self, you know, where's the unhinged behavior going to be playing a part in all of this, that kind of thing. But so, yeah, you know, that all is kind of where that ends up at. And, you know, now we end up going to the press conference where we're going to start seeing a little bit of this.
And this is not yes, we are at the press conference, and this is not the first instance, but it is the first instance we get to hear him speak, and I want to go ahead and give him a big shout out. John Morgan gets an interview question out here, and he drops, you know, he's just having a good moment, you know. Connor, are you like excited? You know, what's the fight going on? How's your day going? And Connor just instantly just fucking loses it. At least from the perspective that we get from the docuseries, I feel like this played out a little differently actually, because we just instantly jumped to Connor just going crazy. Like Connor is just flipping shit, you know, for no reason. And you know, do you respect Dustin? I don't give a fuck. It was a fluke win. I'll correct it, and you know, let's face off and bounce. You know, so
Well, yeah, they start the one thing that I thought was a funny way to start this whole thing was that they start it with Connor throwing Dustin's hot sauce off of
mm,
the podium, and then you get this nice shot from the top down of the hot sauce splattered on the barricade. I thought that was kind of funny. But this is one thing I actually appreciated about the documentary. If you're not going to show us all of the behind the scenes stuff, at least show us the reality of what you are presenting, because I appreciated that they didn't shy away from showing us just how pathetic Connor's trash talk has gotten by this point. You know, they put in your wife is your husband, and I'm like, oh brother. Dustin called it out correctly. He said, you know, your trash talk used to be better. You used to be better at this. And I was like, I appreciate them leaving that line in there, because yeah, he did used to be better at this. This is what I consistently had said at this portion of time. you want to talk about shadow of your former self, Conor. It really showed in the trash talk as I was concerned. That used to be one of his strongest portions of his character, was the ability to cut to the core with the biting lines and the zingers and all of that. And all of that in this lead up with the Jolie's wife and all that shit was just so bad.
Yeah. No, I'm honestly surprised that they left in the line about, your husband or whatever, because what we get later, we don't get any of the wife stuff. So I'm surprised they
Conveniently
left
left that
that one.
out.
Right. So them leaving that one in is an interesting choice considering what they had left out later. But we get a face off, and then Connor kicks Dustin, whatever you want to say. It was stupid. Some shit, Connor walks away. Either way, we are 2 days away from the trilogy now. Connor is cutting the weight. Dana's fucking glazing, doing his normal thing. Yeah, and then we get the social media roundup. We get Max Holloway's voice. Well, Max Holloway has a little portion here where he talks, and I'm like, oh, look at that little foreshadow for what we're about to get here, later
Yeah.
on in life. And this
Dana,
time, oh yeah, go ahead.
so I was just going to say, Dana with the glazing was pretty hilarious in this moment too, because he's talking about the performance at the press conference, and he says, "We got the Connor with the mind games. He's the best in the world at it." And I'm like, a nice display of the continued delusion that 2017 Connor is still a thing. Even back then, it was already a myth that was the case.
Absolutely. And then I think this is key right here too. So we get the weigh-ins. Connor is 156 on the dot this time. Remember last fight, championship weight. He was at least dialed into the point where he was so far in that he would make championship weight. Take it a step back. Well, now we make the minimum, or the maximum weight, whatever you want to say. So
Definitely, yeah, that, and also the fact that they just kind of breezed through the weight cut in this one. And weight cut and weigh-ins just kind of breezed past. Really, not too much discussed
well,
with that.
there
Yeah.
was no fist bump, so who cares? So
It's true. It's a good point. Yeah, but no like adversity with it within the like the same way that they showed us all of that with the weight cut before. Now, granted, we saw that in that episode, so we didn't need to see it again. But if there was any problem with the weight cut, we really just gloss over all of that. And now we get another a little media over a voiceover here where they're saying Villain Connor is back, and I'm like, Villain Connor is back, huh? Villain Connor tried to return and failed to launch. Still, the cycle continues, even if they didn't show it as clearly in this episode. So, yeah, this is him back on the upswing of the villain arc here, just try or really more, I guess, on the downswing, you should say. It's like, they goes from at top of the world, humble Connor in defeat, back down into villain territory.
And then, so this next part, we get another young Connor clip, and Connor enjoys the pressure, is what he's saying. He's always felt, I think he says, like an animal in a cage, or a monkey in a cage, something like that. He doesn't do it for them or anyone else. There's nothing fake about what he does. He does it for competition. When he walks in the cage, he feels like he's unshackling chains, as I believe is how he worded this. And he feels free. There's no pressure. He feels free. I'm pretty sure he says this like 3 fucking times, because I have it wrote down so many times here. He feels prepared to die, but also prepared to kill. So interesting
There you
stuff
go.
here.
I like it. Then also we get another interspersed with that. We get another YouTuber comment, or a media comment, and I think it's the Irish guy that they have a good portion of it. He goes, "Where does he go if he doesn't win this fight? He's fighting YouTubers," is what he said. And I was like, bro, give me a fucking break. Even at this stage, Conor McGregor if he decided that, then maybe. But like, to think that would be the actual, like, that's all that he could do. Like, what a brain dead take that is. I mean, I think that leaving that in there might be a signal to the audience about how brain dead of a take that is, perhaps. But like, I just thought that was something that had to be referenced, to think that Conor McGregor would go from where he is at this point in his career, which obviously is, we're talking it all through from the progression here. Yeah, it is a little bit of the downswing to where we ultimately end up. And this is, of course, even pre-break at the point that is in the documentary. But even still, at this point, to think that, it's win or fight YouTubers, I think is about as brain dead as it gets.
Yeah, as we can see, they will give people 7-fight losing streaks. So Conor McGregor's got a while to go in this organization. So if you think Jake Paul's up next, I got a lot to tell you, brother. It's not happening. He's going to BKFC first, but either way.
And what did I say in the episode prior? You have 3 options with Conor McGregor at any given time. You fight the best, fight the guy who's going to make him look good, or fight a rando. If the best is off the table, you got those other 2 options. That, take your pick at that point. But to say that those are off the table too, and then shut up, come on. Anyway,
Absolutely.
All right. That's just an aside. Let's get back to it, of course, because we are at fight day now. We're here. I mean, this thing is this is the longest episode of the season, and it feels like it kind of breezes by in certain different ways. Like there's a lot of filler, love of the game talk in this episode. So yes, we're already at fight day. And then this is where we get the quote that is on this poster right over here on our left, where it says, there's a saying, reasonable men never achieved anything, and Conor is an unreasonable man. I said, there's your poster headline. I get the sentiment, but yeah, maybe not as correct and profound a saying as it's intended to be.
And this one I find interesting as well, because then you get a portion, the coach is talking about this right here. Most people don't have the guts to speak what they want to do. Connor is a unicorn in that sense. There is an old clip of Connor talking about, having the courage to speak, to have the idea that you could say something out loud and let the world, lead you to that answer. That could have been a great Connor clip to throw in here. I'm confused on why when I heard this portion, I was like, all right, here it comes. Here it comes. I'm getting the one that I know. And it's like, no, it didn't come. So that was interesting. But now the fight is on. They're just in the fucking cage. The fight is on. Now we get a glove touch, or we don't get a glove touch. I'm sorry. We get Herb Dean, I think, is talking about, touch gloves, if you will, and they don't. They go back to the corners, and round one starts, and this is the most fight stuff that we actually get from any of the fights. It's the longest, the longest portion that we get for the fights, which not necessarily, if you know the fight, you know how it goes. From the documentary standpoint, this is what we got. Connor starts kicking a lot. Connor goes for a guillotine, gets sat down and battered.
Well, it was funny to me. So like the editing at that point of that exact moment you're talking about there, it's a good fast start for Connor with the no touch, of course. But then I said, why did they do the editing like the Gilly was going to be something? And I guess it's maybe because Dustin reverses at that point, but like they really give you the like
Yeah.
that, like the sound effect there. It's like, okay, I guess. But I did want to say that because like you said, this is the most prolonged fight footage that we get in the series. And I did think it was pretty cool to see the fights from the perspective that they are showing it, because really they do the that ghost cage kind of thing that they do at the PFL where you can almost like see through the cage. So you're really almost watching it fully unobstructed and without any kind of distraction to it. So I did like that element of it. It was an interesting presentation of the actual fight itself from really kind of a wholly unique perspective. You're not going to see this version of that fight from anywhere else, or really any other fight, to be exact.
No, absolutely. And so, yes, so Connor gets sat down from jumping Gilly, and then he starts to get battered, and Dustin starts landing some elbows. Connor starts landing some elbows, which was very funny to see Connor throwing 12 to 6 elbows like 5 years ago, randomly, like just off his back, just caution to the wind. Herb Dean don't give a fuck. Like, it's crazy because he's talking about this. We actually even get that before this. We get the nape of the neck shit from Herb Dean in here. That's crazy. We didn't even bring that up. That in 2022 or whatever, they're talking about the nape of the neck, but we always said it was the mohawk. Where did we get lost in translation is what I don't know. But Connor is just willingly throwing the elbows to the fucking area that Herb already told him was off limits. But whatever. Connor does what he wants.
Exactly. Connor does what he wants. Herb refs how he wants, and that's always the case, of course. But yeah, I said, the ground exchange sequence was good for both guys. I said it really sucks how good of a fight this could have been without the leg break, because really the sequences that we got from this fight early on were, they were going for it. It was a good fight up until that point. And of course, speaking of the leg break, and there you have it. This is the point where we see that. And it is, of course, highlighted in a very upfront manner. You get the sound effect on top of that, a little bit of these. Yeah, exactly. You get the sweetener track with it. And I said, look, all of what we saw leading up to this point, for sure, it's still a crazy thing. It's still a crazy thing that happened. I mean, it's like he steps back and the leg just goes. It's one of those crazy things in the sport.
I think what's more interesting about this portion here is because obviously you see him step back, ankle breaks, he gets finished, and then you see him up against the cage and everybody's around him, and he's, the coach actually has a really interesting point of view from this. I really like this. He's like, this happened, with 10 seconds left. When 10 seconds are up, you're getting ready to go in the cage. And you're not really paying attention to what's going on because, like, all right, he's coasting. He's good. He's going to make it. So we're all up ready to go get him ready for the next round. And the fight's over. And then we go in there and his leg is all, jacked up, and like we didn't really know what was going on because we were all hopped up ready to go in the cage. You know, that was a very good, interesting point of view from the coach. But the next part that is great about this is, so once you see everybody sitting around the cage, you know what's coming next. And as the person who knows how this plays out, you're like, I'm ready to see how the docu-series is going to handle this one. How are they going to make Conor look good after this? He just gets lifted out. They just
Yeah,
lift him out.
right. They're going to make him look good by not showing any of the thing you are expecting to see at all. Yes, I said that, be it adrenaline or toughness or whatever else, it was it wasn't the pain of the leg break that hurt him the most in this instance, which of course was an interesting part. But yes, then to just gloss over all of that, everything on the ground, no Joe Rogan interview, no nothing. EMTs cart Connor off to the ambulance, and that is the end of the in-ring portion here.
And it makes even less sense because the entire series started with him saying, it wasn't about the fight, it wasn't the leg, it was I was frustrated and I thought my career was over. It started with him explaining how this speech became what it was, and you're building up the entire story of him. He's frustrated, now he's going at Dustin, he wants this fight, and then they leave out that entire portion. I'm like, what the fuck? Like that doesn't even add up to what you've done for the entire series. But as it will, of course, Connor's manager walks out the fucking arena, and like this, I wanted to like give him the benefit of the doubt, because when you see his face, you're kind of like, this motherfucker is like, I don't know. He's kind of got a weird look on his face. But then you're also thinking like, maybe he's just like, it's hard to understand what just happened. Like, bro, he just broke his leg, like his foot, but the manager had some sort of look on his face like, oof, we kind of fucking knew that, brother. Oof, we fucked him up. Like, I don't
Yeah,
know, man.
I mean, the note that I had, manager didn't seem too broken up about things.
Yeah,
He
dude,
certain
I
certainly
don't
he
know.
was like smiling is what it looked like. I mean, now granted, like you said, it's like it could be one of those like, yeah, damn, that's some crazy shit, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I like that is the benefit of the doubt for him with that, but it is a little bit of an odd juxtaposition to see your biggest star client go through what he just went through, and you just be like, well, goddamn, I mean, fair enough if he's that kind of guy, I guess.
Yeah, it was definitely something to see the manager's face. It didn't read right. I don't know. Something was definitely off there. But
No, I
anyway, so
agree.
so it goes back, to Connor in the cage, and he's yelling, "Doctor stoppage, doctor stoppage," and it's like, okay, maybe now they're gonna go back to it. Now we're gonna get it, and nope, they just go back. We get to the doctor in the car, and he's like talking about how he's gonna. He's like, yeah, we probably should have seen that one coming, huh, guys?
And that's what I was foreshadowing earlier. Yeah, I said, ooh, Dr. Surgeon is in there in the car with him. You got some splaining to do, Doc. And Doctor is already starting to do just that. He starts to explain. He says, no, well, he didn't have a recurrent unstable ankle. He was wrapping it so the bone spurs wouldn't worsen. It's like, bro, with the amount of scrutiny on that exact region of the body leading up to this fight, there was a whole lot of smoke for you to not be concerned about a fire of this variety.
Yeah, it's like the silent car ride home, and he's in the back seat, and he's like, "So those were not related at all. You guys know that, right? Like that was not that. Like, come on, you guys know
That's
that."
that. It's why it was crazy that he almost gets let off the hook for all of this. I mean, like it's like we never end up seeing any kind of real repercussions for this doctor. Now, again, like I said, I don't think that he was necessarily going through the wrong thought process. Like I certainly don't want to imply that this doctor was negligent in any way. You know what I mean? Like I don't think
Little
that was the case.
malpractice, I think, is on the table here. I don't know. It seemed like he gave him misinformation. I
Well,
don't know.
that's where I don't think that it necessarily was, because had everything gone correctly, this would not have been an issue with the way that he was looking at it. But of course, things did not go correctly, so maybe there is more of a case to be made at that point.
Yeah, obviously looking back, if you would have won the fight, it's like, damn, Connor did that on an almost broken foot, or with a bone spur. It's like, no, but his leg is in half now because you didn't take the proper precautions. Like, fuck,
Yeah,
like I don't telling
it
him you're good. We're just gonna wrap it up. Like, bro, give him 2 weeks off of it, and then go 10 times. I don't know what the
that's
case may be, but you told him that he was going to be able to kick with his fucking leg when it was hurting already. Like,
And that's what I'm saying. That's what I mean when I say it's crazy that there's no repercussions at all. No, even any kind of mention, not even from Conor, because we're going to talk about what happens in a couple minutes here with the doctor and Conor. But it's like it really is kind of crazy that this doctor sort of unwittingly led them into the exact trap that was sprung. Unfortunately, but
see,
yeah.
but isn't it the craziest case is like by all of this happening, now the surgeon gets a shitload of fucking money. So because
It's like
because you go into the next scene, it's 2 days later, and we're looking at the X-rays, and the doctor's like, "Yeah, so here's what fucked it. You broke this and this. Like, but you see what I did? You see that? I put that shit back together. Ain't that
I
fucking awesome? Like,
was gonna
bro,
say this is
you just ruined his fucking career. Like, oh my
Yeah, this is like the dentist that gives out lollipops to the kids after the
god.
dentistry, right? Repeat
Yes.
customers. Yeah, no. So, but yet, really, before we even get to that portion, though, we do have this very brief media little roundup
Oh
element. I think
yes.
not, just a small one here. But I said, are they really trying to say that Conor was winning that fight? They're really editing these YouTube people to imply that there were some that said that he was winning. I said it was competitive, but Dustin was elbowing him to bits on the ground. And going back and looking at the scorecards, which I did, two of the three judges 10-8'd that round. Now, I mean, I would assume that they 10-8'd the round based on the break at the end. But even still, if they were take the leg break out of it, that would have been 10-9s across. It would have been 10-9s across the board had it not been for the 10-8s in the leg break.
Yeah, yeah. So them fabricating that this was, a close fight or whatever for one round, it wasn't on the judge's scorecard. So it's just a factual, untrue statement. Whatever you want to say. But
Yeah, it was close, but it was a lost round. I mean, like it was close. It was
right.
close enough for the type of round it was. I guess is the way I would describe it.
And then so we have Connor sitting here, and obviously what is on his mind. When can I get back into it? First off, this is crazy to ask this guy. Like to ask the surgeon that already led you to a broken ankle to sit here and be like, "All right, doc, give it to me straight this time. When can I
Tomorrow.
return?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, get
go
up
get
there.
that
What do
cast
you even?
off.
Yeah, why are you in bed?
Yeah. So he tells him, 6 months for you to be able to train again, 6 weeks until you're off of crutches, and 2 months to 8 weeks you'll be back on his bike. 10 months to a year. Keep that in mind, because he was fucking wrong again, brother. 2 months to or 10 months to a year for his return off of his broken leg. It was like four. It was like four, like Jesus Christ, this is crazy. Like, oh, I hate that. I hate that
Yeah,
this is this dude's. He pays billions of dollars for this doctor, and he fucked him over. Like,
and that's what I was saying. Like, this is the portion where it would have been like, yo, doc, not for nothing, but you told me I would be okay out there. Like, maybe there's something that we need to talk about here. But Connor's still cool with the doctor. Team is all cool with the doctor. I mean, doctor, gives a nice little goodbye to everybody as he's leaving the room. No one says a thing to him. I don't know if there's stuff that maybe they caught off camera, but like, I would have thought that there would have been a little more scrutiny on this doctor as to why this all went down the way it did.
and so then we just get Connor in the hospital. He's laid up, his foot's broken, his emotions are down. He's actually explaining that they're up and down. There's moments where he feels really good, he's understanding, and then there's moments where he's like, well, fuck, I'm here for the next year, doing nothing. And that is a crucial part of recovery, of course, and every athlete is going to go through this. Even earlier in the documentary, Connor had specifically said, like, I'm gonna get hurt. Everybody has to go through certain things in this sport. I'm no different than them. I'm gonna go through those just like them, and that's just how the sport goes. So yeah, you get Connor unfortunately having a shitty fucking time, with his broken foot in the hospital. I don't know if you guys have used those TVs in the hospital. They only got like 8 channels, and to turn it up, the shit comes from the remote. It's not cool. Connor was not having a good time, but you know what he's getting? A social media roundup. There you go. We got one.
Certainly is. Yes, of course. Audio collage of Connor is done, except that Connor is done. Look at all that he has done. Good Lord, already. I had said, I mean, this gets really repetitive by this point in the documentary, and we still got more to go. Yeah, I mean, I said that I will say that the doctor does effectively portray the idea that Connor's heart and mind are always on the fight game and winning. The documentary I'm talking about, of course,
Yes.
portrays that his heart and mind is always on the fight game and winning. However, I think that it's an obvious misrepresentation of the facts based on what we know about everything else. But this is, again, I'm kind of repeating the same points because the documentary is repeating the same points at this point.
No, absolutely. Yeah, this would have been a different story as if we had a cameraman following him around after 12 p.m. Like, I don't know. This is
Yeah.
like the very selective, iteration of what we're seeing from Connor. We're seeing the family man Connor. We're seeing the training Connor. Where's partying Connor? Where's
Yeah.
hanging out butt naked on the yacht Connor? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
no traces of white powder anywhere in sight. Of course, not obviously not that they would show that, but you know what I'm saying. Um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, so we're seeing Connor rolling around. He's up on the crutches. He's adjusting to the leg. Of course, I said respect for him for working out. All bandaged up, casted leg. That is impressive. He's doing pull ups with a fucking leg snapped in two. I mean, you got to give him the credit where credit is due for that. He's back in the gym trying to get back to as much as he can, as quickly as he can. So, whether that's the right thing or wrong thing to do, that's questionable, I suppose. But the drive is certainly on display as much as they want us to believe it.
And then so you get a young Connor clip of speaking on his nerves. He wasn't when he was young. He wasn't afraid. He was just not. He just wouldn't do anything. It's not that he was afraid. He just had no inclination to really go ahead and do anything. But combat sports made him uncomfortable, and he wanted to get comfortable with being in the uncomfortable. And that's a perfect example of where he's going to be at now for the next 4 or 5 years from on point to this documentary. Of course, it's going to be a wild recovery. Of course, you're going to have to do a lot of different stuff, and the fact that he's got no will to stop working out or keeping himself in shape, it does show the dedication level that Connor has to this thing, and he has, he even says in a point, he's like, if I can't do this anymore, if I'm unable to even work out, like I don't even think it's possible. He says, I don't even think I can stop at this point. So the self-belief is always there. There's never a moment where it's thinking I can't do this. So Connor, shout out to him when it does come to the mental fortitude. He definitely has it. To the extreme at certain times. Obviously, with this episode and the last episode, you see a very wide range of emotions from Connor. But when he's there, I think it's on point.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. And you certainly see a side of levity at this moment because we get a random Arnold Schwarzenegger sighting
I
here.
I
Arnold
saw this
Schwarzenegger
too.
just
He
showed.
just decided to hop by. Hey, Connor, I'm just here to visit your leg recovery event. Like I don't know what that was about. Random as fuck. Like holy
Yeah,
shit.
Arnold Schwarzenegger is here and he's talking about pedicures, just randomly. So that was just a little aside that happens. And then we really this you want to talk about time jumps when it comes to this docu-series. We talked a little bit about this throughout all of this where it's kind of jumping around at times. We literally breeze all the way through recovery time. We get a
Mhm.
little bit of time, very, very brief little instances. You see Connor doing the with the resistance bands, where he's kind of like, moving around a little bit on resistance bands. That's basically it. Recovery time, we just breeze all the way through it, and Connor is back to training. And like I said, look at the never quitting this guy. Isn't he amazing? Maybe bro just really likes working out, is what I said as well. That was another thing that kind of plays.
Yeah, this last portion really just kind of, like you said, it just skips. I think one of the last portions, before we get the Arnold cameo, and then we get to see Connor transition from the crutch into the motorized, and he went Professor X. I don't know if you caught this one. It was
True.
great, but either way, yes. We get Connor, recovery time. He's doing the resistance bands. He's walking. How's that feel? Is that good? Moving his ankle around and shit. It's not about it's not about the fortune is what he says. It's about the drive. This is another chapter for Connor. Connor drops the line, I'll be back in no time. Where's that Brazilian at? And I was like, is he talking about Aldo? Is he talking about Charles Oliveira? Who knows at this point? But I love the line. It was great. Didn't even
Sure.
matter who it was. Connor clearly loves the competition. It's the enjoyment of the sport. It fuels the fire for him. He's always had the self-belief. He knows he's set. He knows he's grateful for his life, and he's at his best when he's in competition. It's for the love of it. And then we get a highlight mix to end it. And I think we have the coach, or maybe it's Connor saying that he's never reached his full potential yet, or something like that. That's what we get to end it. And then we get an image of or a video of Connor with early on with the press, and he's taking a photo of them, and it was like, it was
Yeah,
kind of a weird ending, but
that's what I
okay.
said too. So yeah, really it's love of the game, love of the game, love of the game at this point. They really didn't have many options on what to say or how to say it beyond this point. So Connor says, he knows he's a made man, but he's a competitor. He's at his best when he's in competition. I said, well, I guess you can continue to let your mind outwill your body at this point, but I guess we'll just watch you continue to descend. Then is basically what it feels like, based on knowing where we've gotten and the fact that 5 years have passed before where we're going to see him again. And to end on the point that you just made there, yeah, very strange ending to this, where he's at a press event. Obviously, there's all the press people behind him. He's got his camera pointed at them, and he says, can everybody just take a half step back to get the picture? He laughs, and then that's the last note that you get on this thing. It was a very odd way to end this series, I thought. I didn't understand like what they were, because you would think your mind would be telling you, yeah, that's like a metaphor of some sort, or like, it's supposed to represent something. But I'm really struggling to wrap my head around what that could be trying to present to us.
Well, if you really want to get philosophical, take a few steps back from where you're viewing Connor right now. Take a few steps back, view it with a farther lens, and I'm sure you're going to get a better picture of what you got here.
And I thought that might be what they're trying to say. However, you motherfuckers in this docuseries did not give me the close-up that I was supposed to be getting. So I've already been 2 steps back. I don't need to
Yeah.
take any more fucking steps back. I have been living 3 steps back before watching this docuseries for the entire time that I've been a fan of this sport, and he's been in it.
I also think this is just the, like, how the Joker ends with him smoking the cigarette, you just wouldn't get it. Like, I think this is the Joker moment for Connor. It's like, aha, clack, and then he's out of here. That, how else would it, if he would have gone into a bright purple Lamborghini and sped off, like, it would have been iconic.
I guess. Well, either way, that does bring us to the end of the McGregor Forever docuseries. So, overall review of this final episode, Chase.
This final episode, I mean, again, as we said before, it is really just a continuation of the third episode. This is episode 3.5, and it is fine. It obviously had the most action when it came to the fight scenes. We got to see most of the actual fight footage in this episode, but it really had some moments where, with the doctor, they preemptively knew that something was wrong, and then something went even worse. So learning about all this stuff really does add to an engaging type of story that really learning more about does kind of, it is kind of there. Like, you really want to reach more into this and find out more. And I think there's obviously, for the person who doesn't know the story, there's still more to uncover that you would really find interesting, especially with how the fight ends. We don't get to hear Conor McGregor's rant about Dustin Poirier and how your wife's in the DMs. We didn't get any of this, and I think that is, one, purposely left off, but two, a failure and a disservice to the people who are McGregor fans and or the people who are wanting to learn about Conor McGregor, because you're telling us everything about these situations and just leaving out the meat and the potatoes, basically. So
You're exactly
this
right.
episode, man, I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I mean, I think that you're absolutely correct that the doctor and the foreshadowing of the leg break does make this episode a little more interesting than maybe I was potentially giving it credit for. But I thought that this was the absolute worst episode of the show. I thought it was essentially, aside from, because we don't even, the fight obviously is very quick, and it kind of gets glossed over, and a lot of the stuff that you're talking about gets glossed over. But they said this is really just a raw pep rally for McGregor's never quit attitude with such absolutely little substance. Zero coverage of his recovery, zero real insight on the return of heel Conor in the fight lead up. That's another big part of this, is that we had the respectful version with Dustin in the first lead up, and then we don't get much of, like, aside from, oh, there's more testosterone in the air, we don't get too much of any kind of real insight about any of that. A lot of training footage, a lot of I do it for the love of the game, and very little else. You can take a little value from the concept of a guy who never gives up on himself, even after loss after loss, but that's easy for someone in Conor's position to say, I think. So congratulations, Conor. You've got yourself to a position where winning and losing doesn't matter, and you can always just live in a world of your own construction. why am I supposed to care about that? Is, I guess, really what I take away at that when it comes to this episode specifically. So I thought that this was weak. I did think that it was, like you said, it was the 3.5. It was, it did not feel like its own standalone episode. And with all that is missing, it felt like it was lacking, especially as the conclusion for a 4-part series.
No, absolutely, and I definitely agree with you saying that this is the weaker episode of them. It really rushed through a lot of stuff. It didn't round out to a very welcoming ending. By the end of it, you're like, what the fuck? What the fuck was that?
Yeah.
So it is whatever as a solo episode. But I think the real question is, Thinker, what do you have to say about the McGregor Forever documentary series as an entirety when it comes to mixed martial arts on film?
Well, I appreciate you leading me into that series review element of things, Chase. So I wrote this out here. What I said was, when we started this, you had said it would be interesting to go over this docu-series since we know the story and the fights and all of that portion already. And I think after watching this through, that definitely is true, not only because, of course, we know the events and what will happen, but specifically because Conor, in the moments that we are watching, does not know those things. So ultimately, this series is more about walking boldly into defeat rather than success as a person who's already been tremendously successful. So that to me is an interesting, like, as a whole package, that in and of itself has an interesting dynamic to it after now seeing all of it. It is very washed over. It is very sanitized. That nature of all of this presentation makes reading between the lines a constant task. But I shouldn't have to do that kind of work in a series like this, I think, even if you're trying to fluff it up a little bit. So I do think that there was too much of that. Documentaries are always biased in one way or another. But when there's so much that we know about the subject and we know that you are not showing, it becomes very obvious and a bit of a chore, albeit an interesting one at times. While the virtues of Connor's are presented in admirable ways, and from what I would say a sometimes legitimate place from Conor, knowing that there is so much behind the curtain to him makes it hard to decipher what I should be believing or taking away as a viewer. There's so much more, and probably a lot more fascinating elements of this man's life that probably will never fully get explored at this close of a range. And that, I think, is unfortunate. At the end of the day, I think that this is reality versus documentary reality. And that probably is the biggest positive that I can lay on the series, actually, is like, that deciphering that you have to do as a fan. You do get bits and pieces here and there of everything that you might want to see, but you're lacking so much that you have to fill in the blanks. For the average person who may not know the full context of the storyline, this is just a positive PR spin on a tumultuous period of a post-Glory Days McGregor. And again, do I care? I don't know.
Yeah, this one is an interesting one because for the casual viewer, I mean, if you want to learn something about one of the greatest and most famous mixed martial artists of all time, this is a great story to, like you said, that is very sanitized. It's a very quick version of what happened without all the stuff that really matters, kind of deal. They handpicked what should matter, and then they left out things that probably do matter a lot more than other things. So, as a casual fan, I don't know if this is what I would say you should be looking into, because you're not getting the right stuff here. I mean, you're getting a portion of it from McGregor's view. Yes, you should watch it just if you want the behind the scenes footage, but you're getting a perspective from the team that wants you to believe that McGregor is like the most dedicated, devoted, most prestigious athlete of all time when it comes to mixed martial arts. When in reality, if you are a diehard fan who is watching this, this dude did not take portions of his career serious at all. There's times where he fucking was, he fucked around a lot outside of the cage, court cases, brand deals, whatever you want to say, all these things that line up into it. Conor McGregor, you have to know the full picture before going into this, I think is very, very key, because if not, you are going to think a completely different thing of Conor McGregor than what the actual reality is. So,
Yeah, I agree entirely. So that being said, then Chase, of course, obviously with a documentary, especially one like this, we talk a lot about the subject, and that's really the basis of everything. But we did talk about it a little bit. So as a film, what would you rate this docuseries?
Not very high, to be fair. I mean, out of 10, I mean, 6 is fine for me. It's not necessarily the best because it leaves out a lot of things. When I compare it to other sports documentaries that really got me into watching things like this, the Last Dance documentary, when I'm watching it, I'm like, oh, no way they're going to really throw the gambling thing in there. No way they're going to really throw the, did Michael Jordan's father get murdered because it was gambling? They did. They actually put the stuff in there that I figured they wouldn't. When I came into this one, I'm like, it's mixed martial arts. Who cares? Nobody gives a fuck what you say. Dana White doesn't even care. You could do whatever you want. Okay, so we get the documentary started, and he talks about his foot being broke. I'm just like, all right, we're leading up into some crazy stuff. You get the bus action, and then they start leaving out other court cases, and then by the end of it, it's like, well, you've stripped away all of the things that are going to make an interesting docuseries of where you put it on me to make my own interpretation of what I'm watching here, rather than you shoving the what you are wanting me to interpret. So it is an interesting one as a casual and a diehard fan to view this one, but for a film itself, this is like, or a docu series itself, 6, I would say.
Yeah, I went with a 5 myself for basically the same reasons. I thought that there were a couple of impressive filmmaking elements at times. I highlighted that one shot of the weigh-in at the COVID Fight Island element, things like that. A couple of other portions that you can go back and pick out as like, that was an interesting filmmaking choice. Some of the storytelling stuff with like the doctor and things like that. There are like certain elements of it that are like from a storytelling perspective decent, and I thought it looked very nice. I mean, obviously the quality level is certainly very high, but the lack of the substance, you cannot extrapolate the two. So I mean, like, it really, you basically nailed the points there as to why I would go with that number. I mean, as a film, you're getting a very, very biased perspective, and while all documentaries do have that, this is very apparent when it's so documented. That's the other thing about it too. It's like we only know this because it's so documented. We would not
Mm,
like there. How many times have we seen in this game, Chase, where like a fighter that you hear about in their fights or whatever, some crazy Tim Means with his situation with his daughter recently came out of left field to us because Tim Means is not as documented a fighter as
yeah.
Conor McGregor is. We only know the things we know about Conor because he is so documented. So for it to be such common knowledge and to not be presented, or to be presented, in bits and pieces at best, does bring this down in a dramatic way. It's almost an anchor on an otherwise decently made set of docuseries episodes. So yeah, I think a 5 is appropriate for me on that. So that then leads us into the next question, Chase, which is, as an MMA film, what would you rate this?
I honestly think it's got to be the same-ish score. This, when you look at what a film about MMA is supposed to be. I mean, yes, this is telling one of the stories of the greatest of all time. One of the Hall of Famers. You get to learn a glimpse into their career. Obviously, it's a very small portion. It's nothing really before, it's nothing really after. It is just a small sector in time. And when you know that they blatantly left out key portions of this, I mean, for MMA, for what we are ranking this as an MMA film or an MMA media source, you can't give it a 10. You can't go 9 or 8 because you left out things that fucking matter. And like, those are the key points of the story when it comes to the martial arts story. If you leave out the whole bickering between Connor and Dustin, if they ever end up getting another fucking fight, well, now you left it out the fucking docuseries. So like, it's just one of those things where if you would have just played it more by the books, and maybe McGregor had some sort, I mean, obviously it's his documentary, he can have whatever he wants in it. Maybe he didn't want the world to know that Dustin's wife was in his DMs. They're bros, so I don't know. That's just the way that I would see it. But as an MMA film, I mean, it's got to be a 6 again, man. What would you say, Thinker? Go ahead.
I also went with a 6 on that. For the reasons with this specifically is that, yes, you get a good amount of the showcasing of what a martial artist goes through, and a lot of the talking points are correct. I mean, again, how many times during this whole thing did I say Connor says the right thing at the right time? That is a recurring theme for sure. Uh, but seeing this level of a celebrity athlete, I think kind of takes it into a different territory than the core mixed martial artist experience. I mean, like, the average mixed martial artist, like if you like that's the lens that you were looking at it through, of like, what makes a mixed martial arts film for you? It's the accurate presentation of what the mixed martial arts world is, in whatever they're trying to show you, and whatever the piece is. So like for this, it almost feels like it can't be accurate, because McGregor is not accurate to that experience at this phase of his life. Like you said, this is a very specific portion of his life. Had this
Correct.
been all of those pieces that we talk about, the callback pieces, the clips from earlier in his career, if this had been that portion of his life, maybe this would have been a 9 or a 10. If it had been this level of a view of that part of his life when he was on the come up, still, legitimately as hungry as they say he was, if we saw the kid that walked into Kavanaugh's gym that he was talking about being the guy always, training like every round is a championship round, calling him after the sessions are over, maybe that would be a different story. But here we are seeing essentially a celebrity who is also a mixed martial artist, and that does not jive in what I look for in a mixed martial arts film. Because what I would say to that too is, okay, yeah, this is certainly an interesting perspective on looking at a celebrity athlete, right? It is a very in-depth look at a celebrity athlete. But in this current era that we live in, I can go on Instagram right now and I cannot, scroll for more than 5 seconds without seeing someone flexing enormous wealth. So I don't need to see that from Conor McGregor. I want to see more of the mixed martial artist, and we do see that in the sanitized way. But like you said, Chase, having it going through the filter takes the score down inherently. It has to. So I think, yeah, 6 is also what I would say.
Yeah, 100%. It's unfortunate because this is the only, kind of mainstream McGregor documentary that we have kind of do. Obviously, there's one on YouTube that we'll eventually have to get through, but this being on Netflix and this being what it is, it's just unfortunate that it feels like I didn't get the full picture, because I know what I'm missing out of this, and you didn't give me everything that I was supposed to have here. It just didn't sit right by the end of it. I don't know. It started
Yeah.
off fine, so.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, then, all of that being said, after talking through all of that and all 4 episodes coming to the end, Chase, would you recommend McGregor Forever?
Absolutely. I do think it is something that the casual audience should be, witnessing, taking part, but keep the note that you do have to do some outside investigation to figure out what exactly happened in certain portions of this, and and outside the cage in Conor McGregor's life that they did not touch point on. The dates and events, I wouldn't take too much into account. You just need to familiarize yourself that they are things that happened, and Conor McGregor is not as good of a person as the documentary would lead you to believe. And that's just the unfortunate truth to it.
Well, for pretty much the same reasons that you just said, that is why I would not recommend this.
Mm.
I don't think that you should have to do that level of research. And I think that for people who are more casual, having to like maybe have to go back and like fill in gaps and try to like do all of this sleuthing and detective work it's too much of an ask from the filmmakers, in my opinion. It's like you should not have to go through all of that to get an accurate portrayal. If I'm going to sit down and devote 4+ hours of my life to this subject matter, I should not have to go then and do an entire research project to get the entire story. You should be telling me an accurate story.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you on that one. I do think, check it out if you want. Obviously with the return this weekend, it is something that it wouldn't hurt you to catch up, because like I said at the beginning of this is the most recent behind the scenes training footage that you have from a fight camp for McGregor that amounted into a fight, of course. So keep in touch, make sure you familiarize yourself with the vibes going into this, and see if they align with anything that you saw in the most recent 3 losses that he had.
Well, and that was also, I guess, the caveat that I would say is that I would assume that the majority of people who are watching our review are going to be MMA fans. And if you are an MMA fan who also lived through this time period, if you're not, if you're a fan that's not a newer fan to the point that you were around for all of this, then yeah, you can watch it and you can have the same sort of frame of reference that we both sort of come into it with to an extent. And you can probably find some value in little pieces here and there, but you just have to, like you said, you have to very much know that you are getting into that with this series if you do endeavor to it. So with the upcoming fight, you do make a good point with that. Sure, this is a fine primer for all of those, this portion of his life leading up to it, and then a very large chunk that will be missing, considering that there was a lot of time thereafter before this return. But if you do want a Conor McGregor primer, where's our Max Holloway documentary to give us our Max Holloway primer, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that should definitely be a thing that exists, and it probably does. We just haven't found it yet and added it to the list. But I think that perfectly might wrap up the film review, of course. If you want to do an ending, just so we can have it for the VOD real quick, and then we'll get into this next portion. That shouldn't be too long, of course.
I
But
certainly
go
would.
ahead, Thinker.
Absolutely. Well, that does bring us to the end of this review. So again, everybody, we appreciate you watching this installment of MMA on Film. Thank you for taking this journey through McGregor Forever with myself and Chase. For yelling about mixed martial arts, this is Thinker St. James. We will see you in the next installment of MMA on Film. And of course, that brings us to the actual ending. Yes, thank you guys. Geez, I know I saw the chat going, and I appreciate you guys for being here. Chase, what had been going on with all of this while we were doing this whole long thing here? Are we getting anything about Conor that we needed to touch on?
We can look into a couple different links here, just for the quick post show, just to keep everybody in the loop that we have seen some stuff. These are just a handful of ones that I've just ran across really quick, and we could just run them down and just take a look at them. We don't even need to say a whole. I mean, if you want to say something, go for it, speak your piece. But I don't necessarily know if me watching him walk across the stage is going to inherently want me to talk more. But we'll definitely see how it goes. So whichever one you want to start with.
Yeah, let me get this queued up here. I'm just making sure I'm getting everything correct.
Yeah, take your time.
There we go. Yeah, looks good. All right. So here, I believe that this should have. Yep, we should be good here. Make sure. Let me know if you can hear this. But I mean, do you want to set this up at all? What is this?
I don't necessarily know what we are getting into. This is obviously the press conference that we were supposed to be watching earlier. If you were here watching it live, this is apparently vintage Conor trash talk. So we talked about him falling off with the Dustin Poirier 3 trash talk, Dustin Poirier 3 trash talk. Let's see if he truly is back.
All right, let's do just that here.
I feel your win victory is to win within 5 to 7 minutes.
Excuse me?
Tell me I've got the wrong assumption. I feel your way to win is within 5 to 7 minutes.
I can destroy Max inside 10 seconds. I have knockouts inside 3 seconds on my fighting record. I have Hall of Fame fighters, multiples, Hall of Fame UFC fighters, defeated and destroyed, both together in under a minute. And I can add Max to that. However, don't get it twisted. If we go into these deep waters, Max is going to be in a lot of trouble, badly concussed.
What happened the first time? What happened the first time?
What happened the first time?
Yeah.
You were left in a wheelchair.
You shot.
That's what happened the first time.
You shot.
Once you go back, you don't go back.
You said fights don't even count if you don't knock people out.
You left the arena in Boston. Wheelchair bound.
We are 0-0.
I wheelchair to pull my ass out of that octagon.
We are 0-0 to your line, brother.
All right.
Okay.
Chase, your thoughts.
I do like the line. You know what they say: once you go Mac, you never go back. And that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that got a little bit of laugh out of me. I mean, I'm kind of with Bleeding Edge on this. I don't know if I would necessarily say vintage for that. Look, he does seem to be at least as lucid and locked in. You know, I mean, like, this is definitely the version of him that you would expect. Max is not a good foil, I would say. You know what I mean? Max does not like give him, at least in this clip. We'll see about some of these other ones. Max, I wouldn't say is like giving him a lot to bite back on. I guess I don't know. Like, okay. You know what I mean? What am I supposed to say? Like, okay. I mean, like, I guess fine. I don't know.
Yeah,
am I supposed to say something more? Do you have anything more,
more
to add?
No, nothing more. No, just roll the next clip here in a second. Let's just see what we missed. You know, this
All
is
right.
obviously we are in the McGregor mood, so we might as well check in on see what we have recently had to deal with McGregor.
Sure thing. This is a shorter one here, so this is only 14 seconds, whatever this one is. Let's see. Once you go back, you never go back unless you go to the hospital and report it. Wow. Hello. Thank you, Hydra.
You say you want to be the triple champ, but what happens if Ian Garry wins the title against Islam Makhachev? Would you fight Ian Garry or not?
No problem. No problemo, as they say in Brazil.
Thank you. You say you want to be...
Yeah, the awkward silence at the end there is pretty funny. Okay, I mean, Ireland versus
problemo.
Ireland.
Yeah, no problemo, as they say. Yeah, I think that's perfect Portuguese you just spoke there.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a really good job there. That's probably exactly how he did one of those ad reads too that we just watched in the documentary, you know. All right, next one.
All right, let's get it queued up here. All right, this I think this is the last one, right? You sent these.
No, there's two more. There's two more.
Oh, I think that the other two. If I don't know if you can figure out which ones they are, but the other two that
send the one at the bottom there.
Yeah, I'm trying to see if maybe they're just not showing up with like the full extensions because it's just you're sending me the Twitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Right. Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm not. Yep. Why is this not? Hold on. This one. Oh. I see. Hold on. Go. Sorry. Do that one first.
This one that I'm doing, or the one that you just sent.
The one that I just sent. Do that one first.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Here
Sorry,
we go.
I'm spamming you links here.
No, you're fine. You're fine. All right. Let's see.
Let's watch this one first.
All right. Let's let this queue up. If it's going up. All right. Here we go.
Knuckle touch the BSD right there. That was nice.
It's like a WWE thing here.
The Mac is back.
I guess so. This really does look like WWE right now.
Whatever Max is wearing here.
Yeah.
Okay, and now the
strange.
clip that is quoted to that, we'll watch that one next.
Oh, okay. So down here. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right. So we got the WWE entrance over here where they were, I guess, like he was looking for Max, I guess is what he was doing there. It seemed very WWE. But all right, let's get this one played here. Running start. Off go your sunglasses. Why is Max in a floaty life jacket?
I don't know, but I want you to know something. And you have always been an advocate against smart glasses.
Yes. Is that what those were?
Oh, just you watch, brother.
Oh no.
This next clip, I want us to witness this next clip together.
Oh, good Lord. Here we go.
This will be good.
Oh, okay. We
You're going to like this.
Oh,
you're going to love it.
Wish they wouldn't do it with the music.
And then we'll just get chucked.
Off they go.
Well, that's pretty funny. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why we get a whole little highlight here for Max. He got his glasses chucked across the fucking.
Yeah, because Oakley is sponsoring this, and we have to make sure we get as much praise for them as we can.
Fair, but okay. I mean,
was that the last one?
I actually think there's one more. Apparently, he sings. Let me find this for you. Let me find this for us.
All right. It was a tactical vest for the kick, says Bleeding Edge. Oh, so you thought he was worried about getting kicked in the chest, so he wore a bulletproof kick vest.
Oh, this is good. This might be really good. Could you guess? No. They said it in the chat earlier, so I hope you didn't actually see, but could you guess what song he's singing?
I did not see.
Okay.
Is it something Irish? I don't know.
It is not. I don't. Maybe. I don't know.
All right. Let's check it out then. I have not heard. I have not seen.
Good deal.
A little bit lower.
Go ahead. You're my wonder wall.
Oh, wow.
I said, maybe you're gonna be the one that saves me. And after all,
this is taking place in Vegas. Not in England.
Your team got your family, your two brothers.
Just
And I'm sorry for
he
that,
heard
ladies.
Volk sing that one time.
Oh,
Paddy, where was the backup? Where was the fucking backup?
I was singing and just went on the mic.
Grab the mic,
I was singing.
I needed backup there, yeah.
a little homie moment.
Paddy, it's hard to follow.
Seemed like a grand old time at this press conference, I guess. Sure, I don't know. I mean, like, again, let me just say it like this, right? You take the Conor McGregor that you knew from back in the day, and then you've got this version of Conor McGregor, and like you can definitely feel the difference. Like this would not have been a Conor McGregor press conference of old, you know?
Yeah, no, times have definitely changed, but it's still the same beast. This, you could still see it there for Connor. Like, you can see the impulsive, irrational choices. Like, why did he just start singing Wonderwall? I don't know.
Yeah,
But
I'm seeing it.
and then at the end, he's like, "Oh, where's my backup?" It's like, this is drunk Connor, but he hasn't had a drink in a while. Like, I don't know.
Dry drunk Connor. Yeah, that does kind of track. Yeah, it was as random as this clip is now. Yeah.
Yes.
It certainly sounds that way. I guess that there was more awkward context at the beginning. Very, I don't understand. I mean, yeah, Paddy Pimblett is there. So, I mean, I guess that's your English connection, but strange. Whatever, man. I mean, like, it's just one of those things. Like, am I supposed to take something different away from this? Is there something more to take away?
Is the Mac back? That is the question to end this out, Thinker. What are you saying?
I mean, I see him sitting on the dais right there at a press conference.
With two belts, two Ireland colored belts.
I said this in the Discord. I will say it again. I don't think that there is anything quite as patently atrocious as those custom belts. Those things are hideous looking, but they are valid. They are his. He did earn them. So I do think he's going to show up to this fight. Again, he's at the press conference. I would say that barring a Tony tripping over the cables situation, I would assume he's going to show up to this fight. Yeah, so yes, the Mac is back one way or another, right? I mean, what do you think, Chase?
I also think the Mac is back, guys. I mean, we're going to see a full season in play. He's going to have another fight by the end of the year if everything goes well, and it's going to be for that 170-pound championship. That's all that I'm saying, guys. The triple champ is coming. Triple C? Here we go.
I guess so. This is the Mac from Temu. Hey. Well, we'll find out if that is the Mac that shows up in the cage, of course. I think that's the biggest question, right? I mean, all of this other shit is fluff, just like the whole documentary was fluff. What actually happens in this fight? We talked about it, we talked about it on the podcast. Of course, that's the last week's Fights podcast, people. Make sure that you are hanging with us on Monday nights. But, I don't know. I mean, that's really, I guess, all that I have to say at this point is like all of this other shit, Wonderwall and everything else is, kind of just it's just a bunch of window dressing for what the real meat and potatoes are, which is what's going to happen in this fight. And I certainly, based on the little bit that we saw of Max, he didn't look like that AI bullshit photo that was floating around. So that's good to know. Max looking locked in, Connor seeming, I guess, as locked in as a Connor can be at this stage of his life. I don't know. Is there anything that we're missing here?
No, I think, unfortunately, we all know how it's going to go down. I think there's a little bit of hope that he could return after 6 years, after taking the sport not as serious as anyone does. This guy potentially could shock the world in a fashion, in a sport where anything is possible. Of course, this is the only option that, the only sport where it's like, yeah, this could potentially happen on an off night. Anything could happen. Somebody could come in sick. Somebody could do this. I don't know if I'm going to 100% be on board, but we're going to go ahead and see what happens. We both took Max Holloway. If you guys didn't know, we put all of our picks out for these fights coming up on Saturday, on Monday. Timestamps are in the description. Make sure you lock in because we both took Max Holloway, and there's probably for good reason. So,
Yeah, yeah, and again, like I said on that review, and like you just said here, Chase, this is the most unpredictable sport on the planet. This is the year of the upset. It very, we could be walking into a whole new world on Sunday morning. So, lock in with us for these fights coming up on Saturday, of course. Thank you guys again for hanging out with us for MMA on Film. I know that these are ones where we don't get to talk to the chat as much, so we really appreciate you guys chilling and having your own conversations there. Yamashow.com for all your merchandise needs and all of that kind of stuff. Tomorrow night, we will be doing Power Slap. Yes, we are, people. I know. Trust me, I'm in the same boat with some of you, and others of you are probably very happy about this. 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I got to find out where you even watch this. Is it on YouTube? I don't know. Maybe it's on Rumble. I'll have to find that out. But either way, we're going to be watching Power Slap tomorrow. So if you want to hang out for that, we will be doing that at 9:00. And again, Saturdays are the fights. Muay Thai Sundays after that. And Chase, you're doing one championship tomorrow morning, yeah?
Yes, one championship tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. live on YouTube. Me and one championship and the fight. So just make sure you guys are locked in. Early morning, we will be up, ready to go.
Yeah, barring any kind of nonsense going on outside of Yama, I should be able to hang out for those fights in the morning as well. So you might be able to chat with your boy in the chat on that one. So come and hang out with myself and Chase for that. That being said, I think that will round us out for this evening. Again, guys, we appreciate you. So thank you very much for always supporting. It is the greatest thing in the world that you guys support as much as you do. And we will see you very soon for more. So until then, have a great rest of your night, a great rest of your week. And as always, fight on.
Game.